Good morning, all, and welcome to the Biomanufacturing and Bioeconomy Summit. I'm Michelle Rozo from the National Security Council. We are delighted to have you all here to celebrate the signing of the President's recent executive order to launch a national biotechnology and biomanufacturing initiative. We will begin today with a bioeconomy roundtable chaired by Director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, Alondra Nelson, Director of the National Economic Council, Brian Deese, and Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs, Jake Sullivan. It is my pleasure to turn the floor to Dr. Alondra Nelson.
Delight to be able to be together to celebrate this great occasion, and thank you all so much for being here. As Dr. Rozo mentioned, I have the great privilege of leading the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, or OSTP, where we work to maximize the benefits of science and technology to advance health, prosperity, security, environmental quality, and justice for all of America. On Monday, as another example of President Biden's transformative leadership in the space of science and technology, he issued an ambitious executive order on advancing biotechnology and biomanufacturing innovation for a sustainable, safe, and secure American bioeconomy. This executive order represents the work of many people over many years, including many of you who've worked tirelessly to bring us to this point. I would like to take this moment in particular to thank Senator Mark Warner of Virginia, who's with us, and Representative Deborah Ross of North Carolina for their leadership and work in this space, as well as Secretary Becerra. He'll join us soon, and Secretary Jennifer Granholm as well for her leadership. And thank you to my colleagues, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and National Economic Council Director Brian Deese, and their teams at the NSC and NEC, respectively, for their partnership in driving the President's vision in this effort forward. This has been a momentous summer for science and technology policy. I've seen some of you over the summer, Keith, others at the CHIPS and Science Act signing. What an incredible few weeks this has been. And its integration into our economic and national security is really one of the really hallmarks of the policy work that we've been doing. When the President signed the CHIPS and Science Act of 2022, he set a bold vision for science, research, and innovation, including in the bioeconomy. The President's executive order implements provisions of the CHIPS and Science Act that will unlock the power of biotechnology and biomanufacturing to address climate change, create jobs, improve human health, and advance our safety. As you'll hear today, departments and agencies across the federal government are making big commitments to advance biotechnology and biomanufacturing, including a range of investments that foster bioinnovation and research and development across the U.S., that bring bioproducts to market more effectively, and that improve access to biotech products while envisioning how regulations can ensure safe production and delivery, and much, much more. A decade ago, during the Obama-Biden administration, OSTP laid the groundwork for this executive order when we released a national bioeconomy blueprint. I know some of y'all will remember that. One of the world's first strategies for biotechnology and biomanufacturing. And now, this biotechnology and biomanufacturing executive order will create a national research and development strategy for biotechnology, mapping out scientific advances that will lead us through the coming years, train a skilled and diverse workforce, prioritizing equity and supporting underserved communities, and expand our biomanufacturing capacity broadly so that every community across the United States can benefit from biotechnology. We now have the opportunity to tap into the potential that biotechnology holds for other aspects of our lives, such as cultivating agriculture that is more resilient to climate events, developing microbes to extract harmful chemicals from toxic waste sites, advancing our economic justice or environmental justice goals, making fuels, clothing, and building materials out of plants, and so much more. As the President so often says, with science and innovation, the possibilities are endless. And it's important to keep in mind along the way that we need to minimize the risks of unintended consequences from these powerful tools. The U.S. bioeconomy must model the norms of biosafety, biosecurity, and prudent and equitable technology governance that we'd like to see the world embrace, that we'd like to see embraced worldwide. To see these goals, we're calling on leaders in industry, academia, civil society, those of you here today, to partner with government to responsibly grow the biotechnology sector, to advance U.S. leadership in inventing and manufacturing biotechnology products that can help us solve some of our world's most pressing problems in ways that benefit everyone. So thank you all so much for being here again today as we begin this work together. You'll hear next from Director Brian Deese and Advisor Jake Sullivan, who will tell you about how biotechnology will bolster our economy and our national security. Then we'll have an opportunity to hear from all of our speakers and the roundtable discussion folks seated here today, followed by panels later this morning. So with that, I'd like to turn things over to my colleague, Brian Deese, Director of the National Economic Council.
Thank you, Director Nelson, and thank you to all of my partners and colleagues in the executive branch. I want to start by thanking members of Congress from both houses and both parties for being extraordinary leaders in this effort. In particular, Representative Ross, thank you for being here today. And I want to say particular thanks to Senator Warner, who, in addition to being a leader on this issue, has been a leader and a partner in passing historic legislation over the last couple of months, and without his efforts, we would not be where we are today. As Alondra just mentioned, we're at a transformational moment for the bioeconomy, and we see this intersection between innovation and biotechnology and the economic opportunity and the economic challenges that we face as a country. And what I want to underscore here is that our effort as an executive branch and as a government is squarely focused on taking those innovations in biotechnology and weaving them into the core of our economic strategy for the country. And importantly, we are poised to meet this moment as a country. This administration, this president, has talked a lot about needing a modern American industrial strategy. And the hallmarks of an industrial strategy center on public investment in infrastructure, secure strategic supply chains, developing critical industries, and in supporting industrial modernization in all of the country and bringing all people into that process. And because of the progress that we have made in passing, in particular, 3 foundational laws over the past year, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act that Director Nelson just spoke to, and the Inflation Reduction Act, we're now in a position to move out in a historic way against a modern American industrial strategy, and the bioeconomy can be at the center of that. We see direct benefits for the bioeconomy, particularly in this legislation, most notably in the CHIPS and Science Act. There are specific supports for the biotech agenda through expansion of research into the biosciences, including biomanufacturing, and in particular the connections between biotech and environmental programs, which we will talk a lot about today. But I think importantly, the CHIPS and Science Act also goes beyond R&D. It supports commercialization of new projects, processes and technologies, scale up, which we know often becomes a key rate limiter in this space, support of small and medium-sized entrepreneurs and innovators, some of whom we will hear from today, and also improving our data, our analytic tools, so that we as a government are able to be foot forward on this issue. And as we use these specific tools, we are going to focus our efforts in the bioeconomy to drive forward 3 key elements of our overall economic agenda. Number 1, strengthen supply chains and lower prices. This is at the core of the president's focus and priority economically. And we can use advances in the bioeconomy through bio-based production of APIs, biomanufacturing facilities that don't rely on foreign suppliers, biomining of rare earth elements to create more secure supply chains and actually reduce costs across time and reduce price pressures in our economy. Number 2, expand domestic manufacturing capacity. For those of you who didn't hear the president yesterday, he is quite passionate about the idea that who said that in America we can't have a strong, robust, and growing manufacturing sector? And biomanufacturing has the potential to be at the lead of that. Biomanufacturing depends on local feedstocks. So it will create real impact to create place-based economic opportunity around biomanufacturing activity in communities throughout the nation. And it has the potential to touch every region of this country. And I think that the diversity of the participants who have come here today to Washington from every corner of the country helps to underscore that point. And number three, it will create jobs and it will strengthen the diversity of the bioeconomy itself, including by supporting a diverse workforce, ensuring that the benefits are spread to parts of our country that have enormous economic opportunity and assets to bring to this effort, but have not yet been dealt into this game. So we know that things are moving fast. We know that the pace of innovation is moving at lightning speed. Our executive order and the structure of how we're approaching this as a government is intended to get us into that game and moving at that speed, and also to make sure that these advances help to advance the economic agenda as well as the national security agenda of the country. And it is with that I will have the pleasure of turning it over to my colleague, Director Jake Sullivan. See, you're smart. You can get up.
Thanks, Brian. I'm gonna.
He's got the weight of the world on his shoulders.
No, I'm gonna stay seated in part
We're a
because
little less efficient.
after I just make a few opening comments, I have the privilege to bring some of our other colleagues into the conversation on the national security implications of the biotechnology executive order and the strategy that Brian and Alondra have already laid out so well. You've heard from Alondra and from Brian what this revolution in biotechnology and how we harness it will mean for American science and innovation, for American workers, and for the American economy. I just want to talk for a minute about what it will mean for American national security and, frankly, for our place in the world. This week's actions, from our perspective, reinforce key themes in our national security strategy: how we invest in the technologies of the future, and how, alongside our allies and partners, we stay ahead of the curve and maintain our innovation edge. And just to take a step back for a moment, I want to underscore, just as Brian did, the kind of core premise of our economic policy is this new industrial strategy. A core premise of our national security approach is the deep intersection between domestic policy and foreign policy. And in particular, a recognition that maintaining and strengthening our comparative geostrategic advantage abroad rests on replenishing, reinvigorating our own reservoir of strength here at home. And biotechnology is central to that. Over the last 2 decades, we've learned the hard way what it means to play catch-up in emerging technologies. We've seen this in the semiconductor manufacturing space. We've seen it in advanced telecommunications, and we won't and can't let that happen when it comes to biotech. Now, much of the innovation in biotechnology and biomanufacturing rests in the private sector and in the academic sector, and that is where it belongs. Government is not going to invent the things we need and is not going to grow them to scale from lab to fab. But government can be a partner and a supporter of the private sector and our researchers, our academic researchers, so that it plays its proper role in a strong, robust, resilient ecosystem for biotechnology and biomanufacturing. And the president talks with great passion about the kinds of investments and the kind of leadership that the U.S. government has historically shown and the partnership it has had with every aspect of the American technology and innovation ecosystem to effectively drive forward the kinds of breakthrough innovations and scaled up biomanufacturing that has made the United States the world's leader. And this is why you will hear today, and you will have heard over the course of the last few days, the significant investments that we're making, not just from our health, energy, and science departments and agencies, but also from security-focused departments like the Pentagon. At the same time, we're also focused on making sure all of this reflects our values, because we are up against competitors in the world who have a different view of the norms and values that relate to science and innovation. And that means coordinating frameworks for privacy and ethics, rationalizing regulations, and of course, doing what we need to do to accelerate the lab-to-fab life cycle, taking great ideas and making great products, and doing so in a way that lifts up and empowers workers in this country, working families in this country at the same time as we're continuing to break through new scientific barriers. We also have to remain cognizant of the risks that biotechnology can pose, including lab safety and security, and that is why we are so focused on the biosecurity elements of the overall biotechnology and biomanufacturing agenda. So we know we've got our work cut out for us, especially in a sector as fast-paced as biotechnology, but we also know that we simply have to make the necessary investments to keep running faster than any of our competition, and frankly, then we have to outpace the challenges that we are constantly trying to confront and to effectively overcome. So as we move on to the Q&A part of this session, I'd just like to make sure that over the course of the next 45 minutes, you all get to hear from the full breadth of the U.S. government and other key stakeholders in this common effort, because there are so many people on the front lines of this issue. And I have the privilege of being able to pose questions to our Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, our Deputy Secretary of Defense, Kath Hicks, our NSF Director, Ponch, and Senator Warner. And Senator Granholm, I just want to start with you. Obviously, the Department of Energy has historically been on the forefront of it, and under your leadership has never been more poised to play a central role in ensuring that the vision that's been sketched out in this executive order and this strategy gets brought to life. And so I wanted to give you the opportunity to give us a sense of how you see things from your perspective and what it is that the department is doing under your leadership.
Great. Thank you, Director Sullivan. Obviously, as the Secretary of Energy, I'm really focused on climate. And the President has this very large goal of getting to 100% clean electricity by 2035 and net zero by 2050. So what does that mean? That means a huge, with those goals, and now with the resources that have been supplied by the bills that Brian mentioned, we are excited to be able to move forward in this. Obviously, this initiative, this whole of government initiative, will boost innovation, energy innovation, clean energy innovation. Obviously, it will help to lead America, to your point, in across the world in science and technology. It's going to grow biomanufacturing, which means jobs in the United States, all kinds of jobs for all kinds of people in all pockets of the country. And it will create and train the next generation of scientists. The global market for clean energy technologies will be $23 trillion by 2030. And you better believe the United States wants to secure a big piece of that, making those technologies, researching them, developing them here at home. With DOE's, from DOE's perspective, just to give you a quick overview, we announced yesterday, actually, $178 million in awards for bioenergy research and development projects, and that's on top of an additional $220 million that we've committed this upcoming fiscal year to support domestic biomanufacturing. We have 17 national laboratories, all of them involved in some way in this effort. You know, we've got those national labs have huge tools that many in this audience and around the table here know very well, including on the health side, you know, tools, quantum-enabled tools that'll allow us at the subatomic level to visualize the complex processes of cells, for example. I'm super pleased that you're going to be hearing from Dr. Jerry Richmond, who's our Undersecretary for Science and Innovation in the next panel, because she oversees those 17 national labs. We are also very excited to be able to use our program offices as well to partner in this process. I love that Dr. Holgram is here with LanzaTech, who has been a partner with our Bioenergy Technology Office in furthering fuels like sustainable aviation fuels with her innovations. We obviously know that all of that, all of the tools that we have, the offices that we have, the funding that we have is going to address climate change. I mean, it just will, especially in the transportation sector, which is one of the hardest to decarbonize that we have not cracked the code on yet. And this is why sustainable fuels are just absolutely critical. I feel, to your point in introducing me, that this is just an amazing moment for all of us as we move forward with all the tools that have been passed thanks to the leadership of the members of Congress who are here, thanks to the advocacy of many of those who are in this audience, thanks so much to the ability for us over the next 10 years, because these tools have been given to us for 10 years at least, to be able to invest and make America lead again. And I'm so glad that the Department of Energy has a big role in that.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. And let me turn it over to Deputy Secretary Hicks. Kath, I know that DOD is announcing some significant investments and initiatives today, and I want to bring you into the conversation from the Pentagon's perspective. So over to you.
Sure. Thank you very much to Jake and for the whole White House team here for the amazing work you've done to get us to this point. At the Defense Department, this moment in the bioeconomy matters for a lot of reasons. First, we know that biotechnology and biomanufacturing have transformative potential for our mission at DoD to defend the nation. It helps us improve capabilities, solve logistics challenges in ways that are sustainable, to Secretary Granholm's point, and to protect our people. And of course, we know that strategic competitors like China are themselves prioritizing these technologies. They want to displace U.S. leadership, and they want to challenge our competitiveness. Under Secretary Austin's leadership at DoD, we know, though, that we have what it takes here in the U.S. to really foot stomp what Jake said earlier. We have here the ability, the ingenuity, the resolve to lead the way, and we have the right kind of innovation ecosystem to make it happen. So what can DoD do to help in this space? Well, over the next 5 years, DoD will be investing nearly $1.5 billion to expand U.S. bioindustrial manufacturing infrastructure, strengthen biosecurity and cybersecurity at those facilities, and use biotechnology to bolster our supply chains. Our goal really is to help be a key catalyst for a domestic bioindustrial manufacturing base and more quickly turn basic and applied research into operational prototypes and reliable, reproducible products that can be made at scale. We believe these investments will incentivize biotech innovation and manufacturing capacity for products important both for commercial and defense supply chains, such as critical chemicals for lubricants, energetics, and fuels. This investment really builds on a history of groundbreaking DoD investment in the biotech space. You can think about DARPA's work 10 years ago that kickstarted a rapid response mRNA vaccine platform for infectious diseases, or more recently funding that the department has provided for some of the early wastewater assessment work for COVID, which has great applications for force protection against the coronavirus or future pandemics, and has offered spin-off potential for U.S. and overseas communities grappling with bio threats. And I also understand, I think we have here with us today 2 of DoD's 9 manufacturing innovation institutes, BioMade and BioFab USA. So thank you to them for all the great work they're doing. Going forward, we expect our focus on biotechnology and biomanufacturing to be transformative for what we do at DoD for our forces. Let me just give you an example of some of the things that are already happening. At DARPA, they're looking at spraying an algae-based substance on a patch of dirt and watching it grow in a matter of minutes into a landing pad hard enough to safely take off and land a helicopter. That is game-changing for us, for distributed forces who are operating from remote islands in places like the Pacific or other austere environments. Or using bio-enabled manufacturing to resupply and reinforce, for example, Army and Marine Corps units spread out on islands across half a hemisphere so they can operate and be sustained no matter what an adversary might do. And by the way, that is a much more sustainable approach from a climate perspective. Or using biotechnology to make advanced sensors that are smaller, lighter, more efficient, and less expensive than what we might build mechanically to detect and warn, for instance, that a chemical or a biological agent has been released. Those examples aren't science fiction, I think, as the folks in this room know. Like the institutions, companies, and agencies represented here today, they're proof of one of America's greatest strategic assets, and that's our incredibly vibrant innovation ecosystem. It's the envy of the world, and we want to help keep it that way. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kath. It's interesting. Anytime you hear about a particular application, it really just kind of comes to life. The whole thing is like, holy cow, that's pretty awesome. Panch, the National Science Foundation has been a foundational pillar of biotech innovation for decades, but I know you guys are not resting on your laurels, and you're hard at work on every element to this. So let me turn it over to you to talk through how you see this from where you sit.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sullivan, and to Director Dees and Dr. Lenson. Thank you very much for the opportunity to join all of you today. I'm very grateful to the President for the executive order yesterday. I think this is a very important moment, and this moment is characterized by the fact that it not only is, as you all outlined, that the tremendous amount of investments that are going to be made all over the globe in this area and how we need to bring out these technologies of the future, and we be in the vanguard of innovation. And so this is a very important moment for us to take all the work that we have done, as you said, Jake, over the last several decades, and we are ready. And we've got a number of things, all the ingredients are there, and we are now, making it into some food products already, if you want to put it that way. But now how do we scale that? How do we strengthen it, scale it, speed it up? And that's this moment. It's a very, very important moment. I like in these kinds of situations to talk about show and tell. It's best way of explaining that this is not just, something that we are making it up. But there is a good example right now in this table for me to show and tell about NSF's investments over the decades. That is Ginkgo Bioworks. So right here, Jason Kelly. Let me walk you through Jason's life story, right? I will spare the first many years, but it's important to know that in early 2000s, NSF funded Jason as a graduate research fellow, right? And then his investigators, Tom Knight and Drew Endy, were also invested in terms of NSF research projects. Now, in mid-2000s, we invested in the Synthetic Biology Engineering Center called SynBerg at MIT, and Jason and Rashma Shetty were both graduate students in that. And then they spun out this company, Ginkgo Bioworks, with their advisor, Tom Knight, and then NSF supported again with the SBIR Phase 1, Phase 2A, and Phase 2B. And then they secured, of course, venture investments with support from other SBIR investments too, venture investments, and today they're a $15 billion company. Now, this is what NSF is about: ideas, people, and therefore, ultimately outcomes of the kinds that Ginkgo is. What NSF is going to do and is doing is to see how do we scale this. It's not how do we get tens of thousands of Jasons, unleashed, if you want. And that's what NSF is about. And I just want to assure you that the investments that we have made in Biology Directorate, and we're making in Biology Directorate, and we are intensifying it even more. Engineering focus, if you look at our Engineering Research Center announcements that we have made, Science and Technology Center announcements that we have made, you will find bio, ag, biomedicine, health, all as focus areas of what NSF is doing. And let's be very clear, this is not just about biology and computing and engineering, as important as they are, mathematical, physical sciences. It's also about the social, behavioral, economic sciences. And that's where NSF brings the fusion of all of these disciplines to make sure that when we invested heavily in the COVID early testing and COVID vaccine and COVID, all of the work that we did in CRISPR and the bacteria in Yellowstone, which came to, help us in the COVID moment, these are things that have to be at the convergence of all the disciplines to actually get the benefits out. And I'm very grateful also to the partnership with Secretary Granholm and the Department of Energy, amazing partnerships with the Department of Defense, amazing partnerships, and Department of Agriculture and USDA. We partnered with them in AI institutes. We have 4 AI institutes now, each $20 million scale, all of them focused on the future of agriculture and smart agriculture and the many technologies that are coming out of that. So whether it is health or biomedicine or climate change or technology related to agriculture and more, we are ready, we stand ready. So we stand ready to invest in more people, more ideas, and of course relating in translations, and that's why we're excited about the TIP Directorate, and I'm glad that Assistant Director Irvin Gianchandani is going to be in the next panel talking about TIP Directorate and what it does in terms of regional innovation engines everywhere, I-Core programs, as well as the IUCRC's Industry University Research Center programs, so that we can scale this. And so I say we are committed to strengthening at speed and scale. Thank you.
So, Senator Warner, that is a tough act to follow. You've been at the forefront of technology and innovation in the private sector as a senator throughout all of your years. You're also, of course, the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. So I think you uniquely have a perspective on the intersection of biotechnology innovation as it affects our economy, our society, and our security. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to give us your perspective as we move forward here.
Thank you, Jake, and thank you for including me. And I do think we should include stock options with all the NSF grants to these young researchers. And let me go ahead and give Jason a shout out as well, as we on the Intelligence Committee have started to look at this issue. He's somebody we've turned to. Let me make a couple of preface comments. One, since there's not many other members of Congress here, I'm proud to say that I think the Intelligence Committee is the last functioning bipartisan committee in the whole Congress. That's a low bar to get over, I understand, but it is something that we claim. And also, Jake, as you indicated, almost by default, at least on the Senate side, we've become the Technology Committee, because working with our partners in the Intel community, we have to look at what's going on all around the world, and in particular, our competition with China. And I think I always try to make the point when I mention China, because I think a failure to mention this plays into the CCP's agenda, that our beef, at least from the Intel side, is not with the Chinese people or the Chinese diaspora anywhere around the world. It is with the CCP and Xi Jinping's leadership, which we know from their own documents, China 2025, the Standards 2035, their goal in a field like bio is not to simply lead, but to dominate. And I think both Brian and Jake have made comments, this is not about who only makes the innovation, but who sets the rules, standards, protocols, which is something, again, that I think we in America and kind of our allied nations, the West writ large, kind of always presumed that we would set the standards on. I think our work has been productive. One, even under the last administration, our Intel Committee was the first to kind of bring together people across the private sector and the government writ large on the question around 5G. As an old telecom guy, it blew me away that when not only did we see China have the leading player in Huawei, and candidly, no American competitor, there were European and Korean competitors, but no competitor, but also we were seeing China flood the zone on standard setting around 5G. And I think, again, candidly, this is one area where the last administration, working again with the Biden administration going forward, I think we've made major strides forward in 5G. In one of the things we talk a lot about on the CHIPS bill is chips, but there is also $1.5 billion in there in next generation wireless and so-called ORAN, Open Radio Access Network, something terribly important where we need to take the lead. Secondarily, and want to again commend Brian and the whole team on the CHIPS Act, but again, it was John Cornyn and I and a group of us on the Intel Committee who said, hey, we saw where we're catching up in wireless. We are starting to do the same, if we're not careful, in semiconductors and in the whole supply chain. And kudos again to the leadership of the administration. The CHIPS bill, I think, will go down as one of the most significant pieces of legislation the president signed. The sausage making was more ugly than it needed to be, but that's just the nature of the beast. But it is law right now, and it is an area, and again, I'm going to commend Jake on this, where we have to think about this not just only from an American perspective, but with our partners around the world, because this needs to be a collaborative effort. The reason why I got the invite today is because the Intel Committee's, frankly, next two deep dives or focus is going to be in biotech, synthetic biology, biomanufacturing, an area where I hope we can build that same kind of bipartisan consensus, that we can work with the administration, that we can work with the private sector on how we look at this competition with China and how we can build not only domestically, but around the world. And our other, Jennifer, is to actually look at advanced energy. We may not, to make sure we keep that bipartisan, we may not call it climate change, we may just call it advanced energy, but whatever it takes. And so our hope is that we can work again with the administration and those of you in the room as we try to develop what the theories of the case are going to be, what kind of governmental investment. My personal belief is that the kind of, and I know this used to be kind of a dirty word, industrial policy, but quasi-industrial policy, 21st century industrial policy that we've seen in chips, we may need to do in bio. We may need to do in advanced energy. We may need to do in AI or quantum. And building that bipartisan coalition is terribly important. Last point I'll mention, and Brian went through the litany of the great work the administration has done and that the president has put, signed into law. One he didn't mention was the American Rescue Plan, which real time in the last few months has been putting out some of these development grants. And I want to give a shout out to our friends from Virginia, Richmond, Petersburg, VCU, Continuous Manufacturing in the biospace was one of those recipients, and I think is going to be a great asset to bear. So, there's been so many, Brian, it's hard to keep them all on your list, but I'd add ARP to the list as well. Thank you, Jake.
Well, thank you, Senator. And with that, Brian, let me turn it over to you to take us into the next segment of the discussion.
Great. So we're going to try to get the economic opportunity, the economic challenges here on the table and jump right into it. I'll just start by framing with one fact. BCG looked into this and said that they project that the economic opportunity in the bioeconomy is on the order of $30 trillion by the end of the decade. It's a really large number, and it's hard to get your head around. In fact, so large that I asked the team to go back and make sure that that was actually right. But to put it in perspective, the entire GDP of the country is about $21 trillion. So we're talking about over a decade growing in an industry that's about 150% of the entire U.S. economic output today. So this is big stuff. To get this on the table, I want to start by bringing our three voices to talk about innovation here. Dr. Holmgren, Dr. Chakrabarty, Dr. Kelly. And we're running behind on time, so I'm going to ask you an unfair thing to do, which is, but you guys pitch investors all the time, so this should be straightforward for you to do. Which is, if you guys can each, sort of in rapid session, give us your 2 to 3 minutes on the economic opportunity and what you think is necessary to keep this process of innovation alive and going. We'll start with you, Dr. Holmgren.
Thank you very much. I can't say enough and commend the President in issuing this executive order, which acknowledges that successfully scaling innovation takes an all-of-government approach. We cannot underestimate the importance of coordination between programs, departments, and agencies in accelerating commercialization, impact, and importantly, education and access. In support of this, I have set a grand challenge for myself and for my team. We commit to ensuring that by 2040, every U.S. consumer, regardless of where they are from and how much they earn, will have direct access to a sustainable version of every product they purchase. We must not let sustainable products be limited to the wealthy. They must dominate high-volume commodity products and be made at the least cost and be accessible to all. We depend on fossil resources for our everyday lives, though these are deteriorating our climate and polluting our air and water. To successfully transition away from virgin fossil inputs, we need scalable alternatives, and I believe biotechnology can be the engine that drives this change. This new carbon economy is a trillions of dollars opportunity and brings high-paying jobs, particularly in manufacturing and rural community. Lancetech leverages robust industrial biotechnology using a naturally occurring organism to transform waste carbon through a process called gas fermentation. Biotechnology is economic and scalable because it is inherently flexible. Mixed waste streams, agricultural waste, municipal waste, and industrial carbon emissions can all be used as low-cost feedstocks. CO2, with the addition of green hydrogen, can make an unlimited supply of sustainable product. We operate 3 commercial plants that convert industrial emissions into ethanol, and that ethanol has been used to make clothing, packaging, sustainable aviation fuel, etc. Imagine polyester from a dress made from recycled carbon from a steel mill. This is not science fiction. We are doing this commercially today, partnering with consumer brands who want these materials in supply chains, and we're leveraging existing infrastructure that allows rapid scale-up. With the production plants we have operating, we will have 200 million gallons of capacity and 1 million tons of annual CO2 mitigation in the next 10 years. It's 3 years, but thanks in large part to ambitious programs and funding assistance from key government agencies, and importantly, collaboration with national labs, we have built a comprehensive suite of genetic tools and AI-based modeling for the first time to engineer biological factories to enable production of 100 different chemicals. Imagine that, 100 important chemicals from repurposed waste carbon. Thanks to this executive order and the IRA, we now have the foundation to dream bigger and bolder, ensuring the U.S. meets its emission targets while creating more reliable and sustainable supply chains. I thank you for the invitation to join.
Thank you for that. Dr. Kelly.
Well, I guess I'll start by maybe reinforcing Ponch's point. Ginkgo simply would not be here without early government funding. So as you're thinking about industrial policy, that's something that we're not going to forget now in the position we're in today. Today Ginkgo is the largest designer of synthetic DNA in the world. What does that mean? It means you go on a computer, you type ATC, GGG, you hit print, and a piece of DNA gets printed out of our labs in Boston or partner companies like Twist in California. We then take that DNA and we put it into the genome of a cell. Think like installing an app on your phone. And it makes the cell do something new, right? And that's our business. We do that as a service for customers. So what types of applications are we seeing our customers ask for? Well, we work with Bayer Crop Science on a project, $100 million project, to engineer microbes to produce fertilizer for crops. Well, they take nitrogen right out of the air and feed it to the crop. If you were successful at this, that's 1% to 2% of global greenhouse gas. It's a big supply chain problem, as we know today in fertilizers. That's one project. We have a project with a company called Alonia that's asked us to engineer microbes to break down PFAS. This is something where the administration's really led with the EPA to get this chemical out of our water sources, right? And we work with companies that want rare disease treatments to rare earth element recovery. The range on bioengineering is unbelievable, right? And to me, this means that the DNA age that's coming is going to be more important than the electronics age that we saw over the last 75 years. While biology is programmable, like electronics and computers, it's important to note that it's not predictable like computers. And we saw this with COVID-19. Biology can get out of control. And so it was great to hear the comments about biosecurity and biosafety. I think this is going to be absolutely critical as we do this. And we've been lucky to work with the CDC, with their airports program that caught the first cases of BA2 and BA3 entering the US that were sequenced. This is the beginnings of like a hurricane warning system for infectious disease. We have to have this stuff as we enter the age of programmed biology. We work with HHS through Operation Expanded Testing. This is, in my opinion, one of the most important biosecurity programs in the country. It kept schools open through the Omicron wave. It's rolled out nationwide, available for free in schools, enormously important. The last thing I want to say is, as we're building this technology, it's extremely important that we do it with care. It was excellent to hear the comments about wanting to share the benefits of this technology with the wider public. I think it's also important to note we want the wider public to participate in this technology. We spend a lot of time on literacy. We teach people to read and write. We need bioliteracy. We need to teach people to read and write DNA so that they're not just receiving the benefits of this, they're the actual creators of this in the future. And so I want to say, the DNA age is coming, and I want to thank you all for your leadership in making sure that it's built on U.S. values. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Chakrabarty.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Jason to say thank you for all the work you all are doing to make this possible. You may not know Solugen very well, so I'll give a brief history. of what we do. Our mission is to decarbonize the chemicals industry, $6 trillion industry that's responsible for up to 6% of emissions, global emissions. But the way we got to where we are today is a bizarre story, and why I think the work that we're doing with this executive order is so important. I'm actually a physician scientist by training, and I've been studying pancreatic cancer for many years and discovered this reaction in pancreatic cancer that makes something called hydrogen peroxide. Maybe you've seen it. It's the little brown bottle on the pharmacy store. I thought it was interesting, a little bit of a discovery that we had, but then it was this poker game. I was sitting next to my best friend, Sean Hunt. He was a PhD in chemical engineering from MIT. He was working on the production of hydrogen peroxide at massive industrial scales using really petrochem processes. What we realized at that point was if you married biology, the enzyme side of what I was doing, with the scaled side of petrochemistry, you can create a whole new way of making molecules that's more sustainable and actually can drop costs. So obviously this idea was fun for us, so we went to Home Depot and we bought PVC pipes and we built our first reactor. And that little first reactor started cash flowing us about $12,000 a month within 3 months. So we had this bigger vision that what we did was we miniaturized chemicals production. We miniaturized it to a point where a PVC reactor could be profitable. And so we, fast forwarding a little bit, we've raised now, we haven't announced the full amount, but we've raised about $1 billion to date, have close to $1 billion in cash, where what we're doing is creating these mini mills for the chemicals industry. So if you guys remember in the steel industry, there used to be these giant steel complexes that now are replaced by mini mills. You see these steel mini mills everywhere. Why not for the chemicals industry? And that's exactly what biomanufacturing can enable. If you look at what Solugen's done, we have a commercial facility in Houston. We have a second facility in West Texas, and we're building our third facility in Marshall, Minnesota. Each one of these are actually built in neighborhoods that are not very well served. These are neighborhoods that have the median income below the poverty line. And in fact, what we've done in Houston, we've now created 150 jobs because of the biomanufacturing capabilities of marrying biology with petrochemistry. In fact, that neighborhood, our Houston neighborhood, is where I grew up. I immigrated from India. We were very poor, very, very poor, and that was the neighborhood that we grew up in. And so for me, the biomanufacturing, the bioeconomy is not just about the ability to engineer biology, it's about the ability to engineer biology and give this opportunity to the next generation of people that can create companies and create more clones of Jason. And that's where we want to go.
Thank you for that. To a point Jake made earlier, if you had any doubt of where the innovative potential is going to come, I think you just put that to rest, that this is the type of innovation and possibility that we need more of in the country. And so connected to that, I want to turn to Dr. Lacasio and talk about, we've heard now in a number of parts the importance of standards, both to unlock the economic possibility but also maintain security. You sit right at the center of that. So give us your perspective on that.
Thank you for that. After hearing these exciting innovation stories, you might think measurement and standards are boring, but they're really not. They're very exciting, as we just said. And it is a top priority of mine to ensure U.S. leadership in international standards development for critical and emerging technology areas. And biotechnology, of course, is no exception, and it does require an appropriate balance as we're considering it. So at the Department of Commerce, we're focused on promoting biotechnology and biomanufacturing innovation, of course, while taking the necessary steps to secure and protect the ecosystem by reducing the risk and safeguarding the U.S. bioeconomy writ large. So one of the critical approaches to achieving this balance is really through the development of standards. And thank you, Senator Warner, for bringing that up and where we are today and how that plays out on the international scene, which is very delicate at the moment. Standards level the playing field so that the best and most innovative solutions can really get to market and be developed into products and services. And as a bioengineer myself, I know and understand the importance of measurement and standards and how the impact they have on really driving innovation. As a matter of fact, I would say that no discovery has ever been made without the ability to push our capability to measure it, right? So if we can't measure it, we can't make that discovery. So at NIST, we work on a whole bunch of different types of standards. I'm just going to mention them quickly: standard materials, standards data, and documentary standards that Senator Warner pointed out. Materials standards are called reference materials. They are used by companies nationally and globally to benchmark measurements, to test their new techniques or technology to see if it really works, and ultimately to provide confidence that what they are measuring is right. And so NIST, for instance, has developed a monoclonal antibody standard, and that's used by biopharma really all over the world to validate their manufacturing processes. And we're also harnessing the power of engineering biology to develop standard biotechnology platforms in sectors beyond healthcare, and that's sustainable biofuels and agriculture, chemicals, plastics, and others. And we're also working on data standards, which are essential to ensure that biological data is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. We work with HHS in this area while also having appropriate security controls. And then finally, I briefly want to touch on this really important issue of documentary standards, which are developed by consensus in large international standards committees. Trusted partnerships are essential for U.S. standards leadership. And we cannot lose our place in the world on international standards committees at this very, very delicate time where leadership and presence and influence is so important globally. And I just wanted to mention in that regard, NIST is the convener for the U.S. Technical Advisory Group to the ISO Technical Committee on Biotechnology. And that committee is setting the standards that will help U.S. biomanufacturing be competitive all over the globe. And so it's a critical work that we're doing. We're engaged with really everybody here in doing that work. We engage with industry, academia, government agencies, through these standards committee, through research consortia, and of course through Manufacturing USA institutes, and some were mentioned already here today. And NIMBLE, the Biomanufacturing USA Institute in the Department of Commerce, is part of that. So I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Thanks for allowing me to speak about standards and these close, trusted partnerships that we have with everybody around the table are so important in this new initiative moving forward. And happy to be here. Thank you for your work.
Thank you. To close out this section, I want to ask Representative Ross to come in here. You've led on this issue in the House. You come from a state that is leading in this area. I would just love to get your perspective on the economic opportunity and what it's going to take for us to unlock this.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you so much for including me in this, and thank you, Secretary Granholm, for amplifying me. I want to say, though, I have to take a little bit of exception with Senator Warner. The House Science, Space, and Technology Committee is the most bipartisan committee, and it is a committee where everything is a bipartisan bill or amendment, and we voice vote we've only had one fight, and that was where two members were fighting over who got credit, as opposed to the issue. And that is a wonderful thing for everything that you do, because if in the House we can all have a common purpose in advancing the sciences, that is going to be good for the future of our country. And on the House side, I picked being on that committee because I represent the Research Triangle Park, and I represent 7 colleges and universities, including 2 HBCUs, 1 women's college with a very strong STEM program, and the largest community college in the state of North Carolina. And North Carolina and the Research Triangle, with all of the wonderful companies and research institutions, is leading on innovation. But the thing we're going to need to do to realize President Biden's vision and all of our vision is to train up the people who are going to do that manufacturing. And that is the job of our community colleges. That is the job of some of our undergraduate programs. And that is why I am so excited that the science part of the CHIPS and Science Act is devoted to giving NSF the money to give grants to all of these institutions of higher education. I'm an Ivy League grad. I love the Ivy League and the MITs of the world and the Stanfords of the world. But let me tell you, Wake Tech Community College has gotten 3 NSF grants that I have gone to the, with a big check and everything, including first generation community college students from the Latino community who didn't graduate from high school, getting apprenticeships and going directly to be able to work in manufacturing. And I will close with this. It is doing all that, but if we do not fix our immigration system, particularly for the dreamers and the documented dreamers, we are not going to have the next generation of the best and brightest innovators. It's got to be all in here, where everybody comes to the table and works on the ideas, and then we train the workforce to be able to do that manufacturing, good paying jobs in all of our communities so that everyone can benefit.
Thank you for that. I want to end this debate by saying the one thing I'm confident of is that there's no two set of counterpart committees that would spend their time fighting on who is more bipartisan. That I'm confident of. But I think it actually underscores a very serious point, which is for all of us, the potential of the CHIPS and Science Bill operates in making real the authorized funding that now needs to happen. It requires the standard setting and the forward-looking intelligence and balancing of security and standards that we've heard to unlock this economic opportunity. And the only way we're going to do that is by maintaining our focus on the economic opportunity and keeping the politics out of this to the maximum degree possible. So I very much thank both of you for being here and for all of you for the innovation that you're doing and your contributions here today. And with that, I'll pass it to you.
Right. Okay, so our last remarks in the roundtable are really, Representative Ross really queued us up. We kind of are going to end where we began with really talking about the health and the science pieces of this. All of the biotechnology products that we've talked about today started here in the U.S. and really started initially with some health innovation, and we're going to begin the conversation talking about where we are now in that space. I'm going to begin with our extraordinary Secretary of HHS, Secretary Becerra, and I wanted to get started with you and ask you to speak about the implications of recent biotechnology for human health and how your team is leading in that space.
Dr. Nelson, thank you to everybody on this team. Thank you to the innovators out there. Thank you. Actually, I don't have to say much, whether it's the rapid antigen test, which was as basic a device as you can think of, to the mRNA vaccines that have saved millions of lives. Without biotech out there, you can imagine what the world would look like right now with COVID. And so it goes without saying that for the health space, you are indispensable, and we need to do this. And I believe what President Biden is doing, he's telegraphing a couple of things. Partnership, values, because as we work together, as we share what we know and what we do, we have to do it with those values in mind. And so I think it becomes really important how we launch on all these things. And I suspect probably the best thing for me to do is in telegraphing partnership to thank Jason, because he just shared one of his great scientists with us, Renee Wezergin, right? Wezergin, because
yeah.
You always forget there's nothing between the R and the G. Renee Wezergin is our new, just announced, inaugural director of ARPA-H. And just as Jason took her from DARPA, we got her back for ARPA-H. So, and we're very much looking forward to sharing in so many different ways. And we're looking forward for you sharing as well in so many different ways. How can I say this? We want in. We want in, whether it's starting with the innovation, the investments, whether it's the breakthroughs, whether it's the actual application, we want in. I think the president is telegraphing, we want in. He's telling you, cancer moonshot, ARPA-H, RADX. Forgive me for all the alphabet soup designations, but it would take my 3 minutes to talk, just give you the actual names. But we want in. And how in do we want at HHS? Well, let me continue with the alphabet soups. NIH, CDC, BARDA, ASPR, FDA, and then let me focus finally, because I want to stay to time, PDUFA, MEDUFA. We want in. You want in. We have a partnership. We share a lot. If we don't get something done real soon, we're going to share catastrophe together. We will have to lay off the people that let you harness innovation if we don't see Congress act soon. And I know that we have the Senator and the Congresswoman here who absolutely want to see us get that user fee bill done as quickly as possible. But I will tell you that this new generation of these user fees and the work that was done to sort of set the policy to calibrate it to the 21st century are going to let you go, with us working with you in partnership. We don't want to regulate you. We want to partner with you. And I think that when you take a look at all of the different agencies within HHS, it's not just health. It's, you know, it's the security, not just of your a next family and what you do on cancer or with that artificial limb. It's food security. It's climate security. We're part of global security because that next weapon may not be some mechanical device, but something you insert inside a body. And so all of those things, we want to work with you on those. And at the end of the day, and I want to thank Lori for mentioning this, it is about standards, because the ethics that will be involved in this partnership and the equity, and Congresswoman Ross, I thank you so much for that mention, I think will drive that leadership for the U.S. If we get the ethics and the equity right, we're not going to lose anything. We're just going to keep gaining the stars that you see in this room who come from all parts of the world to do the innovation and the breakthroughs here in the U.S. So HHS wants in. Count us in this partnership and in these values. Back to you, Dr. Nelson.
Thank you so much, Secretary Becerra, and really for showing how, you know, government institutions can be sites of innovation and catalysts for innovation. Really appreciate your leadership there. So we are really out of time, and so I regrettably are going to sort of ask questions quickly of our next three speakers and ask you all just to speak in turn. So Dr. Nina Tandon is here with us, who's the CEO of Epibone, and would love to hear from you, your perspectives on biotech and biomanufacturing for health. I'm going to introduce the other two speakers and allow you to wrap up. We also have Deputy Secretary of the USDA here, Jewel Brenna. We're delighted to have her. Would love to hear from you about how biotechnology holds promise for agriculture and the work that you and Secretary Vilsack are leading in that space. And the last word will go to Dr. Kathy Wotecki, my colleague on the PCAST, the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. And as we ask PCAST to do, would love you to look to the horizon. Where are we headed next, Dr. Wotecki, and how should we be thinking about that in the space of science and health innovation in the bioeconomy? Thanks. Dr. Tandon?
Thank you. So despite the incredible advances in medical science over the past, throughout human history, we ended up with a situation in which the vast majority of us, 75% or more of us, will be eventually acquiring parts of our bodies that we weren't born with. Bone is the most transplanted human material after blood, and we are replacing millions of joints per year, oftentimes because of just a couple millimeters of damaged cartilage. I'm an electrical engineer, went to community college after Cooper Union and pivoted to this space, so thank you for your comments on that, and ended up in the lab of Bob Langer at MIT, which was a really wonderful place to explore this work. So the only way to get human bone until now is to cut it out of a human. What we do at Epibone is we take the cells that grew our bodies in the first place, repair our bodies every day, and extract them and put them into a biomaterial, culture them, and we've got, after 3 weeks, we can make bone, 4 weeks we can make cartilage, and last year we made history as the first biotechnology greenlit by the FDA to use this approach in humans. We have now successfully, as of August 25th, completed our phase 1/2 implantations, first in man, first in class therapy, really happy about that. We're painting a world, a picture of a world in which we don't need to replace parts of our bodies with metal, plastic. We can be the medicine. Okay, I'm trying to go really quickly here. The U.S. is poised to be a leader in this space for obvious reasons, historical reasons, and we have the key ingredients to keep our space as the front runner in spades. We are a magnet for talent and venture capital. However, policy can help us tip the balance to realizing our potential, and I see two key areas where we could really use help. Firstly, despite the fact that surgeons are allowed by the FDA to use banked bones for any of our 207 bones or 360 joints throughout our bodies, the FDA currently requires companies like ours to undergo lengthy 3-phase trials for each, or maybe even more than 207 trials in order to realize all the various products that we could. We have a platform technology patchwork regulation. And what this means, I mean, considering that OTAT has only approved 24 products in their history, that is a insurmountable kind of challenge. So what I would ask is for us to think holistically about a regulatory framework in which surrogate tissues and organs can be regulated as such. We are not a device, we are not a therapeutic, we are not a biosimilar. Secondly, one of the tenets of our field, and many of you would agree here, is that the process is the product. Meaning that we're very high touch, lots of human manipulation involved in producing these products, labor intensive. The labor intensiveness of living therapies translates to highly skilled jobs. The perishable nature of our products translates to local production. And the necessity of strict regulations and IP protection means that regional hubs will emerge to serve various geographies across borders. We are seeing Singapore position itself very strategically to service APAC by increasing in investment in biomanufacturing capacity. I would like to see us be the world leader in export of human engineered tissues. So I firmly believe in a future in which we as humans can be our own medicine. Let us not replace parts of our bodies with parts cut out of ourselves and other people. Thank you for the opportunity to share my perspective, and so excited about this moment we all find ourselves in. Thank you.
USDA is absolutely thrilled to be a part of the historic investments in advancing biotechnology and biomanufacturing. And you think about how appropriate it is for USDA, George Washington Carver and his 300 uses for the peanut. He was the first biotechnologist. And so we have the history. We're just going to move forward. Importantly, this EO will mean that sourcing for industries doesn't have to rely upon overseas markets. It will give us an opportunity to support local rural economies right here at home. And of course, the investment of this administration in climate-smart agriculture and forestry means we're producing things in more sustainable ways. Today, the Secretary is going to announce a huge opportunity, partnerships for climate-smart commodities, which will invest in the production of commodities using climate-friendly practices. It'll also allow for market opportunities for many of our farmers and our ranchers. USDA obviously has a huge footprint in this EO. We're training the next generation of biotechnologists. We've talked about youth engagement. We announced $68 million through the Agriculture and Food Research Initiative to train the next generation of researchers, educators, and extension professionals. I'm wearing green today, not because it's USDA colors, but I'm going to actually speak at a 4-H event. 4-H is the youth development arm of agriculture this evening, and it will just be wonderful to talk about our youth as the opportunities that they have to advance this exciting work that we're doing. USDA is also building new regulatory processes. We're trying to promote the safe innovation of agriculture and alternative foods. The USDA Bio Preferred program, which many people are aware of, it's going to advance the development and expansion of markets for bio-based products. We have a catalog of over 16,000 registered products. So this new investment of $10 million will support the scale-up of activities and studies on the benefits of bio-based products. Jason, and hopefully many of his clones, mentioned fertilizer production, and we will make a $500 million investment through our new program to support independent and innovative production of sustainable American fertilizer. We also joined the government-wide Sustainable Aviation Fuel Challenge, meeting that 100% demand of aviation fuel by 2050. We're partnering with DOT, with Energy to leverage 1 billion tons of sustainable biomass for domestic supply of fuels, chemicals, and materials. In terms of forestry, we announced $32 million for wood innovation and community wood grants. We're leveraging an additional $93 million to partner funds to develop new wood products that will enable effective use of U.S. forest resources. And then we're advancing opportunities for cellulosic biomaterial in developing carbon accounting standards from forest stewardship, the use of harvested wood products, and extending the life of wood in use, reuse, and recycling, and nurturing carbon to soil in a cradle-to-cradle life cycle analysis system. Excited to partner with the National Institutes of Health to ensure that data on persistent poverty can be integrated into cancer surveillance as part of the government-wide cancer moonshot efforts. And so that you can see that we're very invested. It's part of what we do at USDA. This work goes naturally, it's a natural fit with us. So we just applaud the president for the action that he has taken, and we're just excited to partner and be a part of this historic effort. Thank you.
Great. I'll wrap this one up for you, Dr. Nelson. The President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology is taking a deep look into the current state of biotechnology and biomanufacturing in the United States, and really endorses everything that we've heard about the enormous opportunity. And really, we are in the midst of a new industrial revolution. But we've identified that there are three key gaps that stand in the way of America's continued leadership in this rapidly growing market sector. And these are an inadequate capacity for scaling up new innovations to manufacturing scale, regulatory uncertainty that we've heard about, as well as an outdated national strategy. We're really pleased to see that the new executive order addresses several of these concerns. And the recently passed CHIPS and Science Act contains many relevant new programs and authorizes very badly needed funding. PCAST is hopeful that Congress will provide those funds, and we're going to be concentrating our work on identifying additional and very complementary steps that President Biden can take to further the adoption of biotechnology and further as well advance biomanufacturing. So in closing, I wanted to mention that as a long-term faculty member and dean at a College of Agriculture at a land-grant university, the public universities are ready partners for biotechnology and biomanufacturing education, research, as well as economic development within their states. They already educate over 70% of the students seeking bachelor's degrees in the United States, and they also have a mission of service to the states in which they exist. So thanks so much for the opportunity to update you on what PCAST is looking at, and also to remind you about the role of public universities.
Thank you so much to PCAST for your leadership and your leadership in the academic sector. So we are at time. Dr. Rosso, are you going to wrap us up? Okay. I couldn't imagine a better start, a better kickoff to the President's visionary transformative executive order. Looking forward to working with all of you, and we will ask you to be back here. We're going to take a little break in 5 minutes or so. Okay. Thank you all very much to our panelists.
All right, after that terrific start, we are now going to dive into two areas of the initiative with two amazing panels. First, a discussion of how biotechnology can solve some of the most pressing global challenges, moderated by Dr. Kari Walnuts. And second, a discussion of biomanufacturing and the vital task of moving from the lab to marketplace, moderated by Dr. Liz Reynolds. I'd like to now turn it over to Kari Walnuts, Deputy Director for Health and Life Sciences of the Office of Science and Technology Policy.
All right, thank you. It's hard to follow that first panel, but we're going to see if we can keep the energy and excitement level up here. I don't think that will be hard, given who we've got represented. So nearly exactly 50 years ago, two scientists walked into a deli in Hawaii. I know that sounds like the beginning of a really terrible joke, but actually it's a story about the beginning of the biotechnology industry. For students of science history, you know that, of course, I'm referring to Drs. Boyer and Cohen. And over corned beef sandwiches, from what I understand, they hatched up an idea about moving genes from one living organism to another on a foundation of many, many years of basic research involving many, many people, that is directly connected to the first recombinant drug of insulin, the first biotechnology company right here in the United States, Genentech, and straight to this panel that we've got here of really amazing folks. It's because science, at the end of the day, leads to solutions, and biotechnology is no exception to that. Biotechnology has the possibility, as you hear from our panelists, to really address some of our greatest societal challenges. But it is also important to recognize that biotechnology, like any technology, is a tool. And it's how we use it that really matters. So when you've got biotechnology, which is distributed equitably, where the products and benefits and people involved are really representative of all of the people in the United States and the world, when we have the time to carefully consider all of the ethical dimensions of the technology in question, when we ensure safety and security, as we talked about this morning, it's incredibly powerful. It's super cool. That's just my bias showing there. And it feels limitless, or at least limited only by the boundaries of the human imagination. Fortunately, there are no limits to the imaginative abilities of the folks represented on the panel today. And I'm going to give them very brief introductions that do not do justice to them as individuals or their accomplishments. But I trust you all know how to use Google. Or in a throwback to the 20th century, you could actually talk to them and find out more. But starting here at the far end, I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Gilda Berabino, who's president of the Olin College of Engineering, and who is training the next generation of innovators, as well as being an innovator herself in the field of sickle cell disease. Ms. Ginger Krieg-Dozier, welcome, who is an architect by training, who makes bioengineered bricks. I feel like I could talk to you all day because really, really extraordinary. Dr. Lisa Dyson, who is the founder and CEO of Air Protein, who is literally taking space-age technology into sustainable meat alternatives. Can't wait to hear more about that. Dr. Irwin John Chantani, did I come close? Assistant Director at NSF of the Directorate for Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships. He leads the newly formed TIP Directorate, and we'll hear more about that. Mr. John Mello to my left here, President and CEO of Amyris, which is focused on using synthetic bio for clean, sustainable consumer products. And last, but absolutely not least, to my immediate right, Dr. Jerry Richmond, who's the Undersecretary of Science and Innovation at the Department of Energy, who really oversees the innovation engine at DOE and is going to talk to us about the next-gen sustainable energy sources. So if we can launch right in, President Berabino, I'm going to turn to you first. So a lot of people think of biotech as being all about the life sciences, but really what we've heard today and really the horizon is all about how it's evolved into intersecting with engineering, with computational science, with mathematics. From where you sit, what does that cutting edge look like, and what does it mean for the potential of biotech to solve some of our biggest challenges?
Well, thank you, Dr. Wallenitz. You heard a lot of what it looks like in the innovative approaches that were discussed in our earlier session. And I want to bring our attention to our ability to develop and implement biotechnical solutions to global challenges is critically dependent upon foundational technical training that meets global bioeconomic and social needs. And this training must be agile, it must be steeped in innovation, and include design education, entrepreneurial education, and education on the ethical, responsible, and accessible use of technology. And how do we educate for innovation, social purpose, and development of inclusive, accessible solutions? The kind of technology where we bring together the biological sciences, engineering, and computer science. Well, we work collaboratively across disciplines and across sectors, academic, industry, government, and communities, as co-creators. We entertain new ways of thinking and doing. We insist on cultural understanding. We ensure the inclusion of different technical perspectives and perspectives from individuals from different backgrounds. And we involve the communities we are serving in the design process. With this approach to training, students and the practitioners they will become will be equipped to identify needs, design collaboratively within economic and other constraints, understand and engage the global communities we aim to serve through biotechnology, and ultimately meet the increasingly complex global challenges we face today and in the future. Quickly, I want to tell you that recent reports on the bioeconomy by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine in 2020 and by Schmidt Futures in 2022 speak to the need to produce a technical and diverse workforce and the need to integrate technologies while working collaboratively across the sectors. They also acknowledge the range of opportunities that must be met with a talent pool reflective of society and a workforce that is becoming more brown and more female. Research shows that those from historically excluded groups are drawn to fields and careers that provide opportunities for societal impact to help others, to give back to one's community. Global challenges solved through biotechnical solutions is an attractor. We will all benefit from bio-inspired pathways to attract, retain, and ensure success of all who have the capacity to create impactful solutions. And simply put, bringing these technologies together and across disciplines and boundaries allows the breakthroughs that then position us to translate those breakthroughs to those impactful and powerful solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dossier, we're going to turn to you next. Continuing this theme of thinking outside the box in biotechnology, it's not just about medicine, it's not just about agriculture, it's really got the capacity to inform a lot of different fields. Biomason is a very cool example of that. So can you tell us a little bit about your perspective on what the cutting edge horizon looks like? What are some of the opportunities? And conversely, what are some of the challenges that you see?
Absolutely. Sorry. We have to design the solutions for scale. 10 years ago, we weren't paying attention to the built environment. We know now that 8% of CO2 emissions are coming from cement. Cement is one of the pillars that enabled our modern environment, but they're really inert. They're not doing anything. The materials that we use to build with are just standing there and starting to fall apart. So we have this new opportunity to actually design the materials for our future. When you look at construction materials, it's not something that's, you have a lifespan of 20 years and it goes away, and we're talking about hundreds of years. So being able to empower the built environment to do more, and I would say, coming from the earlier session, my background being in architecture and writing my first NSF grant, I started all this in my second bedroom. I didn't know what I was doing. All I knew is I wanted to grow cement. I went to the library and checked out all the books that I could on biomineralization and started to learn about biology, which biology is very, very beautiful. But there's so much more that biology can do. And I think that, through the support that Biomason has had through the Department of Defense, through DARPA, for being able to make underwater living marine cement that continues to repair itself and grows, and it pulls CO2 out of the water. Those are the types of innovations that I firmly believe that our future needs, as well as being able to, create these vertical takeoff and landing pads, as was described earlier, being able to spray this technology down. So I think from an architecture perspective, it's also looking at what else can these materials do, because we've only discovered 1/1000th of 1% of the microbes on the planet. And right now what's happening is we're starting to lose a lot of that diversity. I think that when it comes to the challenges, when we're talking about a bioeconomy, we're also required to think through the substrates and what we're going to use as feedstocks for all of these amazing innovations. So we also have a responsibility to feed ourselves. So, in my opinion, I would obviously put the feedstocks for human health before I would put it for cement. So that creates more of innovation for us to figure out what's the minimal amount, that we can have in a supply chain. What's the most local thing that we can have in the supply chain so that we can start to utilize more and more waste streams on a local level. And then I think lastly, in terms of challenges, is looking at what adjustments do we need to make to our policy to enable these innovations to really get to scale. When we're looking at the built environment, it's a very conservative element. It's full of standards and regulation, which absolutely have to be there. But what are things that we can do now that will enable those materials to really have a chance to start to decarbonize our world?
Thank you so much. And in continuing along this sort of sustainability theme, I'd like to turn to Dr. Dyson. So I did Google you. I watched a lot of your videos, and I've heard you talk a lot about a sustainable future. Can you talk a little bit about what that means to you, and where does biotechnology fit into that?
Absolutely. So wonderful to be here. And I'll start by talking about how I got here. So my mother's from Louisiana, and I went there a lot as a kid, but I went back in 2005 to a very different reality. After Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, I was one of the many people who went to try to help rebuild the city. And at that point, it became very clear to me just the devastating impact of weather events. That was my first time really seeing the devastating impact of weather events. And as weather events become more frequent and more intense, my question was, how could I be a part of the solution? So ultimately started a company called Converti and then Air Protein with Dr. John Reed and James White to really attack that issue. And so as we try to innovate to solve some of the problems, thinking outside the box is necessary. In our case, we actually thought outside the planet, going to another governmental agency, NASA, during the space program in the 60s and 70s. They had the question, if we were to send astronauts on long space journeys, how could we feed them very effectively if they're gone for a year or more? And of course, if you leave the planet with carbon, you don't pick up any along the way. You have to figure out how to recycle it. And so one of the ideas they came up with was to use elements of the air, essentially, to create nutrients and create closed-loop carbon cycles. So we picked up where they left off and began working on a way to take elements of the air to manufacture products, and ultimately with Air Protein, food. And one of the biggest problems, of course, is that the food industry produces more greenhouse gases than the entire transportation sector. And it is a huge contributor to deforestation. 2019 saw record fires in Brazil to make room for cattle grazing. So that's something that we're really focused on addressing. And so with the technology that we're commercializing now, making food, essentially protein being kind of the biggest culprit in all of this, the way that we make meat specifically, making that from elements of the air in the way that's nutritious, all the essential amino acids, vitamins and minerals, vitamin B12 and other things, so that we can deliver really cleaner, greener solutions for our progeny. So as we, this is a very exciting time. A lot of people worked hard on, leading up to this initiative. I'm excited that it's being announced and that there is an effort to invest in advancing the bioeconomy. And as we do that, we can think about, when my grandparents were farmers, back in, when they were born, early 1900s, there were 1.6 billion people on the planet. Now, we're almost at 8 billion. We'll be at 10 billion by 2050. We really do have to figure out how to solve some of the big challenges out there. And the bioeconomy really is going to be a part of that. And so I'm excited with this announcement and to be here today.
Thank you so much. Dr. John Chandani, I'm going to turn it over to you because a really striking thing when you look across this panel and frankly across this room and our conversation this morning is that there's this enormous intersection of public-private partnership, academia, government, industry, all coming together. Can you talk about what NSF's role is in fostering that ecosystem, particularly in biotechnology?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks very much for having me. Great to be here. Really just a momentous occasion this week with the signing of the Bioeconomy Executive Order. One of the things that the previous panel alluded to was the unique American innovation ecosystem. The American innovation ecosystem that, frankly, others all around the world look at us with envy, trying to be able to emulate what we're able to do here. So what makes that American innovation ecosystem so unique? Well, for 50 years, for 70 years, going all the way back to Vannevar Bush and Science, the Endless Frontier, for those of you who might remember that manuscript or might have read that manuscript, That spoke to the value of federal investment in basic research, often at academic institutions, and often that ultimately powers new discoveries, new innovations, new discoverers, new inventors, right? And as a matter of fact, when I look around the room and I have conversations with some of you as I've had this morning, many of the companies that exist in this space today, and frankly, nearly every single synthetic biology company has its roots tied back to that basic research investment by the federal government and has its roots to programs like the Small Business Innovation Research, the SBIR program. You know, Ginkgo Bioworks, the director commented on that on the previous panel, $3 million of investment by the federal government in SBIR. Today, it's a $4.4 billion company. Right? Maybe even higher than that. But the illustration there is talk about that return on investment. And that is through the symbiosis of bringing together academia and industry and government to have a shared agenda and carry things forward. So how do we do that at the National Science Foundation? Well, many of the advances that we have supported over the years that have led to ideas or inventions with commercial potential, they have come out of investments that we've made to programs that try to nurture, try to catalyze those partnerships of bringing users and consumers and beneficiaries to the table together with the researchers to motivate the problems to work hand in glove on those problems with the researchers and ultimately to lead to piloting and prototyping and results that could be commercialized or taken to society more generally. The first NSF-funded engineering research center devoted to synthetic biology has produced dozens of companies. So Ginkgo is a great example, but here's another one, Bolt Threads, right? Bolt Threads is applying innovative biotechnology to sustainable manufacturing using yeast and fungi, ultimately to be able to produce silk for fabrics and synthetic leather for shoes and handbags. So these are examples of how NSF investment can catalyze partnerships, bringing folks together, folks at the labs, folks in civil society, folks in private industry to really pursue a shared agenda in terms of the challenge spaces that we're trying to tackle. The other thing that I'll say is we are also very passionate at the National Science Foundation about direct partnerships. We work closely with our colleagues at the Department of Energy. We work closely with our colleagues at other agencies, USDA, National Institute of Food and Agriculture. We work closely with private industry and foundations as well. Why? Because we want to be able to bring together shared expertise, shared resources to ultimately be able to understand what are the problems that we want to tackle. What's the research agenda tied to this executive order, for example, that we want to be able to address when it comes to mitigating climate change, to food security, to the social and behavioral aspects of this work, to the ethical aspects of this work, and ultimately to education and workforce development. And one last thing that I'll say, I think one of the things that we're really passionate about increasingly at the foundation is how do we tap into the challenges and the opportunity potential in every corner of the country. The NSF Regional Innovation Engines program that my new directorate launched earlier this year, we got close to 700 concepts from all around the country, every corner of the country, every state, every territory engaging in that effort. Why? Because when you think about the circular bioeconomy, when you think about the future biotechnologies, there are challenges that take different forms in different regions. So diversity is important from a thought leadership perspective, from an individual perspective. It's also important from a location, geographic perspective as well. How do we harness the geography of innovation? How do we harness the individual diversity that makes the U.S. so unique? And so that's why this public-private partnership ecosystem is so critical at the end of the day.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Miller, I'm going to turn to you next because I've spent time on your company's website, and it's filled with phrases that I think really capture this idea of the exciting potential of biotech innovation, synthetic biology, clean chemistry, sustainable ingredients. There is also a lot of interesting info about sharks, so pro tip if you visit. But when you're talking to your neighbors, your family around the Thanksgiving dinner table, who maybe don't use those phrases a whole lot, how do you convey that biotech and the life sciences industry are the pathways to the future?
Great. Well, first of all, thank you and good morning. By the way, simple answer, you do it by putting products in their house. But let's come back to, first of all, it's a great privilege to be here as an immigrant, being in a place that actually innovates at the level of our country and being with a government that's just made a bet in what I believe is the definition of the future revolution in chemistry, couldn't be a better time. And to do it where the initiatives are spot on, I think are, again, a moment in time that we shouldn't forget. And, you know, there is nothing like organisms and great minds coming together. Because when you can get organisms and great minds coming together, you make better chemistry, period. And that is the greatest gift we could have. We have $40 million of, more than 50 million actually, of DARPA and DoD investment over the years. And the dollars are really good, but I have to tell you, more than the dollars, the quality of the thinking and the quality of the projects have moved our science well beyond anything we can imagine. When we first started working with DARPA, I think it took us about 3 years to develop chemistry from a target, basically get a molecule or get a organism to make a molecule. Today, it's less than 9 months, and I can tell you that the projects we did with DARPA, the quality of thinking, how they pushed us, the targets they gave us, made us better, made us the best innovator in the world for biochemistry, for bioengineering. The bioeconomy is real, and it is the future of all chemistry. So I think the $30 trillion number earlier, it is big, but it's also real. And that's the part I think we have to remember. I love programs, but I think of programs as inputs. I think of products as impact. And I think DNA-based chemistry is not about the future, it's here. And I want to give you some examples, and I want to leave you with an ask, because I think it's a moment that not only should we be the best innovators and the best owners of the science, we should also be, and we have, I believe, the right to be the best manufacturers in the world, the best biomanufacturers in the world. And we do not have that today, and that is not right. And that's the part that I think we could really change in this country. So more than half of you in this room are today using a product that has an amorous molecule inside of it. I have no doubt. By the way, it might actually be all of you. Because if you actually wash your clothes, you're probably using something that's made by Amyris. If you clean your home, something that's made by Amyris is probably in that product. I can go on and on. If you buy a product from L'Oreal, if you buy a product from Estee Lauder, if you buy a product from Shiseido, you are probably buying something that has an Amyris ingredient, meaning a biomanufactured molecule inside that product. And that's my answer to your question. How you get your neighbors to relate to biochemistry is you make biochemistry part of everything they use. And why would they use it? Because it's better for them and better for the planet. And why would you not, right? So that's a critical part of where we go. Now, China is absolutely at the forefront of wanting to make biochemistry the #1 strategic initiative in that country. And I know that because almost every day I have a call from somebody in the Chinese government who wants our technology in China. To this point, we've decided not to, for one simple reason. They require the technology and the manufacturing to stay in the country. They require the technology and the manufacturing to stay in the country. And I don't want to manufacture in China, so the technology is not there today. I think that makes this a huge priority for us to move beyond. We actually do both. We invent new chemistry, and we actually fix supply chain issues in current chemistry. And I can give you examples of many of those, including your shark one. Why are sharks all over our website? Because, like, whether it's skincare, I mean, can you imagine wanting to look young by killing sharks? It just doesn't make any sense. So when we discover that the #1 emollient, the #1 moisturizer in the world comes from shark liver, we decided that wasn't right. So we actually decided to bioengineer a pathway to make the #1 emollient in the world. And we did it in a way that now we deliver 80% of the world's need of that moisturizer. We're expanding the market for it. We do it cheaper, we delivered it faster, and we deliver it in a more quality way than any other source in the world. That's biomanufacturing. That's bioengineering. That's what we do. On creating new chemistry, like, I hate the fact that we pack silicones into our hair and our bodies, and I hate the fact that we drain silicones into our water system every single day. So I decided we invented new chemistry. We invented a molecule called hemisqualane. Why did we do that? Because we thought using silicones we just had enough of. So sure enough, what is the fastest growing ingredient in our portfolio? Hemisqualane. What's it doing? It's eliminating the need to use silicones in hair care and body wash throughout the world. That's biomanufacturing. That's biochemistry made real. We really are all about solving big problems and doing it with biomanufacturing. The last example I'll give you is squalene as an adjuvant, because I think it's a perfect example of the national security issue we face and we could really make a difference with. So at the beginning of the pandemic, it was clear adjuvants for vaccines were a critical part of the solution. As we looked at that carefully, we identified that squalene from shark is one of the top used adjuvants in vaccines, including the flu vaccine. And we realized that the supply chain isn't very predictable, like how many villages can kill how many sharks in how fast a time to ensure we stock our vaccine. It just doesn't happen. So we decided to kick on a project to make squalene directly from fermentation. In 9 months, from target to finish, we have an organism that loves to make squalene and is actually doing a great job making it at industrial scale. That is biomanufacturing. That is the bioeconomy providing solutions. Now, let me get to the issue and what the ask is. Today, we are the largest biomanufacturer in the world of advanced chemistry, period. We make over 20,000 tons of advanced molecules. We have the most sophisticated biomanufacturing facility in the world. Just started operations in Brazil. And that's it. It's in Brazil. We're the largest. We're the best. We do this day in and day out. We've scaled more bioengineered molecules than anyone in the world because we believe products matter. Products make a difference. So what's the ask? The ask is that we actually, in the U.S., become the leader in biomanufacturing, not to leave it to other parts of the world. It's in other parts of the world because we haven't solved feedstock. It's in other parts of the world because we don't invest in it. It's in other parts of the world because we haven't made it a strategic priority. My ask is simple. Let's make it a strategic priority. And by the way, the statement about do we want in? We want in. As a company, we are the best in the world at developing, scaling, and manufacturing biomaterials. So guess what? I am happy to share our capability. I am happy to create a mega complex in the U.S. that actually solves the biomanufacturing problem for the U.S. And by the way, we can do it for a lot less money than the government just gave Intel. We can do it for $1 billion. Give us $1 billion, we're in. We'll actually build it, we'll support it, and we'll make it open to the industry so that the U.S. overnight can become the biomanufacturing hub that enables biochemistry to really make a difference, not only for the planet, but starting here in the U.S., whether it's our military or whether it's the everyday citizen that deserves better products on their shelves every day and shouldn't be forced to buy what the petrochemical industry has decided they should get every day. So with that, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. All of you had shark on your meeting bingo card, are well ahead of the game. Dr. Richmond, I'm going to turn to you because, climate change, mitigating its effects, finding sustainable sources of energy, these are sort of the challenges of our time, our generation. We heard Secretary Granholm speak to this today. How do you think about this when you look across the landscape of everything out there? How does the innovation at the intersection of biotechnology and energy climate solutions look to you?
Well, thank you. It's really pleasant to be here. More than pleasant, it's exciting too. So it's just really exciting these days. So I'm so delighted to be here, and I'm so delighted to have all our partners here too, NSF and other agencies, because if we're going to solve this problem, we have to go across agency. So a little bit of the background of my office. I oversee $15 billion of funding for research in both the basic area and the applied area of DOE, all of those programs. I also oversee funding at all the 17 DOE laboratories, Three of them are NNSA lab. They are security labs, so we are tightly tied. That Jill Ruby, the other undersecretary, oversees. We are tightly tied to the NNSA side in all the bio things that we are doing. And we are also tightly tied to the other undersecretary's office, which is in deployment. And so we are making sure that what happens in the basic energy to the applied energy gets driven right over to deployment with Bill. So we have a lot going on right now, and it's very exciting. My portfolio supports research at universities and colleges all over the country with stories, success stories that similar to what NSF has, and that's why it's wonderful to have them as partners, as well as to be able to work with many, many companies that DOE has over the years. And so the DOE is uniquely positioned in both biomanufacturing and biotechnologies because we have the tools. With these laboratories, we have incredible tools, whether it be the light sources or the centers that we have, that, for example, were key for the first molecular structure of the COVID protein that then we used to derive the vaccines from. Our light sources are open to any of the biotechnology areas in addition to medicinal areas. Because we span the basic fundamental research to applied processes, we also have research that goes all the way through the TRL level so that we can easily go towards commercialization. This is really, really important to us to have this now ready to go, ready to take shape and go. So at DOE, we are actively designing and testing dedicated bioenergy crops and modified microorganisms to break down renewable plant biomass and convert it to fuels, chemicals, and also materials we currently would otherwise get from petroleum. As the Secretary mentioned, we recently put out $178 million in basic research efforts across the country to support the production of next-generation biofuels, bioproducts, and biomaterials. And there's additional money for critical minerals and materials, which is a huge deal for us at DOE. And so with this $178 million, it's to identify genes relevant to improve bioenergy crops and for better, and since I'm, as you noted, a Kansas native, I totally get this, for better biomass production to understand how soil microbes move carbon and nutrients, which provide a wealth of genetic potential relevant to biotechnology, and for quantum-enabled imaging concepts to expand the ability to visualize complex biological systems within cells. And with our exascale computing facilities, our supercomputers, which everyone is available to use, we're going to be right at the forefront of any kind of modeling that needs to be done. DOE also supports large team science, and like the bioenergy research centers that are in association with the Joint Genome Institute, the Agile Biofoundry, and the BOTTLE, how can you come up with an acronym like BOTTLE, consortium, and I'm not going to tell you what that stands for, consortium at the forefront of our long-term efforts to be more sustainable sources of energy and products independent of petroleum. Recently, a DOE-funded project demonstrated the ability to design microorganisms that can take concentrated CO2, I get very excited about this one, from stacked gas emissions and convert it to commodity chemicals, acetone and isopropanol for industrial sources. The work appeared in Nature Biotechnology this past February and was funded by the Office of Science and EERE. We worked together in our applied areas and included researchers from Lasatech. So the DOE National Laboratories, as I noted, they are really the gems in the crown of the DOE, and they are suited to provide state-of-the-science instrumentation, not just our light facilities, but a lot of other instrumentation for users to come in and take advantage of, and of course the computational analysis and simulation. So with that, I just want to say we're excited. We're excited to be involved in this. I'm excited to be here this morning. I'm excited to be with NSF too and all the other agencies because together we can move forward in this area in ways that no other country can. So, all right.
Thank you so much. So I just, before I move to the next question for all of our panelists, I just want to note that, 25 years ago, coming to a meeting on biotechnology, you would look out over the audience and it wouldn't necessarily reflect the full power of the diversity of our extraordinary nation here in the United States. And I know folks who are watching this on the live stream may not be able to see the audience, but I can, and I just want to say that it really does represent the face of the United States, and that doesn't make you excited about the future of the bioeconomy. I don't know what will. I just want to note that, as exciting as our day is, and we've heard some amazing stories that I think are incredibly inspiring in terms of the power of biotechnology to solve some of these challenges that we've heard about. It's also important to be aware that its use or misuse can raise legitimate ethical issues for which we need to engage society, as well as you heard this morning, safety and security concerns. We heard a lot in the first panel about making sure that in U.S. leadership, we are building the future of biotechnology and biomanufacturing on our values. And so I want to ask each of our panelists, quite unfairly, because it's an incredibly complex issue, in 1 or 2 minutes, to talk a little bit about how you think about ensuring that biotechnology is rooted in our values, principles of equity, ethics, safety, and security going forward. So maybe we'll start with President Barabino and then just move on down the line.
Sure. I love those complex questions, especially as an engineer. We tend to think about the systems approach. How do we break it down and address it that way? So thinking about it, I'm going to address it in components. Like, it's who we train and how we train. It's what we value and how we express those values. It's what we do and how we do it. It's how we define questions and allow people in to help answer those questions. It's holding those values set and paying attention to them as we develop our training, as we develop our solutions. When I think about it, I think that we need to make sure that we make our fields relevant and relevant to people's lives. I love the story that Dr. Dyson showed. That is actually a real-world example of how you take your passion, your values, what you learn, what you believe in, and apply it in a way that makes a difference with technology and how it is used for the better, for the broader good for everyone. Like making proteins from air. I mean, that's fantastic. I also want to draw our attention to the tools. You heard about all these breakthroughs, these cutting-edge technologies. Those are enablers. These tools enable us. We need people who understand and can use the tools. We need a diverse group of people who can develop the tools and then use them responsibly. So putting that all together, if we are acting in ways that we include everyone, including those who we are trying to serve in the actual process, be it educational or be it applying or translating. So when we put all those pieces together, I think that's how we stay true to our values, and we use them in ways that can be impactful for the economy, for the social good, and for moving forward.
Yeah, and I really appreciate those sentiments too, because it is about how we learn and how we can predict. I think that I'm a lover of nature. I'm a lover of biology. So if I look at what can we learn from nature and biology, and how can those lessons be applied to what's happening in terms of designing a material and going all the way through skill, and being able to think through all the different challenges that may come to be. If we look at just our general material world, we live in a world of ubiquity, and that ubiquity gets us in trouble. So not being able to predict what's actually going to happen, from whether it be disparity, climate change, all these things have an impact. So being able to actually take the time to predict and model out how these different pieces go. We live in a very exciting time right now, where there are a lot of very exciting goals that are coming up, and we have one as well. We want to take out 25% of CO2 from concrete by 2030, and it is a significant load to how you do that. And I think that that's where right now we have a responsibility in our time today to really look at how are we going to go through solving these challenges, because in our world, we know that there's some urgency that we have, and we have a lot of excitement and a lot of opportunities. So this is the time to rein in on that and actually be able to put some plans together by learning from our past and learning what nature actually can teach us.
Great, thank you. And I'll just build on it and really focus on 3 points, biosafety, bioengineering, and consumer perception. So on the biosafety side, I mean, we today make over 20,000 tons of material a year from highly engineered organisms, and that number is growing dramatically every single year. The standards and the regulatory bodies, I think, do a great job holding us accountable to ensure the biosafety of those processes is absolutely done with full integrity. So I think of that as, yes, there's lots of noise, but the standards and the regulatory bodies working with ethical companies, I think, are actually doing a good job on the biosafety side. I think bioengineering is the scary part. I mean, look, between what Ginkgo and Amherst does, it is crazy. It's like science fiction. You could literally, I mean, we just had Eric Schmidt at our offices, and we actually put him in front of a screen because you could literally type in whatever genetic code you want to get the organism to do what you want. So imagine that. Whatever you want ACTG sequence to be, however long you want the string to be, you could sit there and program it with a simple language where you tell it what you want it to do. It's pretty scary. So there, I think there's a lot to do in the industry to come together and really establish standards for how programming genetics over time is going to be safe and done in a way that's transparent so the world feels it's safe. So I think there's progress to be made there, and it needs to be done as an industry and with government support. I think the last one is probably the biggest problem to solve. All right, the biggest problem to solve is really consumer perception. So people ask me, well, why did you build brands in the beauty industry? It's actually really simple. I needed for biotech and bioengineering to go mainstream. How do you make it go mainstream? You make it sexy. How do you make it sexy? You focus on beauty and fashion. When you focus on beauty and fashion, all of a sudden it becomes mainstream. And then you partner with amazing people that have big voices that are credible. So when they say they're using bio-based material and that it's better for you, the world shakes its head and says, oh, can we get more of that? But I think that's the final frontier. It's the perception issue, and it is a global issue. It's not just a US-based issue.
Well, thanks for the comments of everybody so far. I think with DOE, we worry a lot about the issue of security, and we've been doing that for so long that it's important for all of us to think about when we are devising any kind of a new chemical or any way that we're doing it or any new device that we're doing that we are conscious of security issues. But I want to shift, though, to something that Gilda and I have talked about together for years, and that's concerns about the workforce. None of this is going to get done unless you got the workforce. And right now we are struggling to get that workforce in place, particularly with COVID. Younger people who really want to be able to do something that makes a difference in the world, not just fuss around. And this is our time. This is our moment to go after that. That workforce, though, we have to know what the data suggests with regards to what it means to build that workforce, especially in diverse areas. We know that many of the by the data, that undergraduates don't go to graduate school from underrepresented groups because they can't afford it with a graduate stipend of $30,000 to $35,000 a year. Come on. So DOE is stepping out with that and saying, look, we've got to put our money where our mouth is, and that's why we're putting in the budget $45K a year for graduate students. Is that enough? Not for the brightest, because they can go off to companies, but it's a start. We can get all the other agencies in the government on board to do this, because we can't continue to ignore that $10 an hour for the brightest kids in our country is not enough if they're working 60 hours a week. So I think we really have to take this very seriously. We also need to look at the data with regards to what it's like in many of our research groups or graduate departments where our minority students are left off to the side, have very few peers in the group to help them along. You know, we can talk about mentoring, we can improve the mentoring, but it's peer-to-peer. If you have underrepresented groups in your labs, in your departments, you got to make sure that people are talking to them. You know, Gilda and I just talked about the fact that, and another woman here, I wish she would raise her hand and say, you know what, as a young faculty member, if you're African-American, white, African-American faculty member, what white guy graduate student would want to work for you? right? I mean, let's talk about that. Let's talk about these issues, because one of my colleagues, Sharon Neal from the University of Delaware, said, I asked her that. I said, what white graduate student, male graduate student would want to work for you? And she said, the courageous ones, the ones that are willing to take a risk. This shouldn't be happening. You know, so I think there's just a lot of change that we have to be serious about, especially if we have more and more community college students going into it. And NSF is just wonderful in helping this area too, but we can do more. And DOE, we recognize that, particularly with Justice 40, where we are making sure that every FOA that goes out, every NOI that goes out, shows that we are committed to diversity in whatever you put your money into, whatever city you put your money into, whatever business you put your money into. So I'm really passionate about this, if you couldn't tell. But I think we have to take this really seriously. It's about time to do that, especially with the money that's coming in right now. It's not just widgets, it's not just toys, it's the people.
I see people in the audience like just itching to cheer, but they're like, I'm in the White House. That wouldn't be appropriate. So it's okay to cheer. Erwin, go ahead.
Well, so first of all, I couldn't agree more with what Jerry said just now, and frankly, I couldn't agree more with what all of my fellow panelists have said so far. It's hard going fifth for this type of a question, let me tell you. But you know, as I listen to this, as I listen to the comments that have come before me, and by the way, Jerry, I think you would agree with this. It's not just about the workplace at the undergraduate setting or the graduate setting or in the faculty setting. It's how do we inspire students at the K through 12 level to become excited in this and find themselves in a formidable but appropriate workplace setting so that they can have the opportunities once they get into undergrad and grad. But as I listen to this conversation, you know, I wrote down 3 words, right? Carrie, I wrote down, and they're all P's, and they're not public-private partnership, which is the last thing you asked me about. So they are people, perspective, and principles. So to me, as I think about what I've heard, and as I think about the question that you raised, Carrie, you know, it starts with people, right? And it is so critically important when we think about the research experiences that we're trying to create, when we think about the next generation of biotechnology tools and capabilities that can give rise to the next bioeconomy for the future, that you have that diversity of thought that's baked into that from the start. You can't build this and then they will come. We've tried that for far too long and failed miserably in the process. And so we need to think about ways in which, what are the strategies, what are the steps that we're going to take to be able to create that workforce from the start, and recognize that when you think about people, you're meeting people where they are. Right? It is, we for too long have said, oh, we're training people to get a PhD, and we're also training people to get a master's or a bachelor's or a community college degree. Why is it an and? Why is it, you know, an afterthought? It sounds as an afterthought. It sounds dismissive. We should be thinking about meeting people where they are, because there's talent at every level that can contribute to a STEM workforce and that can be STEM driven in terms of being able to contribute to the next generation of biotechnology solutions and the next generation of bioeconomy. So why do you need that diversity of thought? Well, it brings in multiple perspectives, right? Lived experiences, lived perspectives that can be brought to bear, whether it be your experience in Hurricane Katrina or it can be your experience in another setting, right? And also that perspective benefits when you have different disciplines that can come to the table as well. This is one of the reasons why at the National Science Foundation we take great pride in having a directorate that's focused on social, behavioral, and economic sciences. You need the SBE sciences at the table to think about humans in the loop and how you're designing technologies from a bioethical, from a safe and secure perspective. And so I think that is critically important, that the people drive that diversity of perspective that can be brought to the table. And that diversity of perspective is what should ultimately be giving rise to the principles that we employ when it comes to thinking about what is a firewall that we shouldn't be crossing, or what are the safeguards that we should be designing in when Ginkgo or Emrys or any other company is thinking about new technologies and capabilities, or someone in their garage is thinking about new capabilities when it comes to the biotech of the future. So for me, at the end of the day, it's people, perspective, and principles, because I think those 3 are really intimately tied to address the question that you put forward.
Well, if it's tough going fifth, what about 6? So,
if anyone can do it, you can.
Oh, thank you. So what I'll add to this, a lot has been said already. So what I'll add is wherever you are playing in this space know why you exist, your organization, your company, your research institute, and use that to drive how you build and how you grow. Use that to inspire people. At our company, every Friday, we have a company-wide moment of gratitude. And I am inspired by the team and how they're inspired by each other, the gratitude that they show to each other about how we're building towards our objectives to have impact, the impact that we're looking to have. So I set that as kind of the base, just to add to all the comments here. And in our case, our air farming platform, it's all about creating products, creating food, nutrients in a way that's carbon negative, not just carbon neutral, but carbon negative, to have that impact that we're looking to have as we continue to increase our population and have to provide solutions. It's a way of making nutrients and products that use no arable land. So feedstocks are, renewable power and elements of the air primarily. And so it's a new way of manufacturing where you can manufacture in any geography, any climate, any time, day or night, rain or shine. And that's something that can have the impact that we're looking for. And in addition to that, creating things that are economically attractive so that they can be accessed by everyone, ultimately, have an impact, here in America and globally. And that economic attractiveness was the thing that allow us to scale to have that impact on producing things that are cleaner, that are greener, and better for both our progeny and for the planet.
Well, I could probably spend all day talking to this group, but that would A, destroy my carefully crafted efforts to get us back on time, and B, my colleague Dr. Rosa would probably throw things at me. So I'm just going to take my own moment of gratitude and say thank you to all of our panelists for not just today, but everything that you are doing. Speaking on behalf of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, I joked to some of you at the beginning, today is a day of celebration, and tomorrow the work that we've laid out for ourselves in the executive order and launching this initiative really begins, and I am looking forward to working with everyone in this room and all of the folks out there tuning in as we engage in that work together. With that, Dr. Rosa, all yours.
Great. And what a great start to the morning so far. And the third will continue with exciting discussion and panelists. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Liz Reynolds, Special Assistant to the President for Manufacturing and R&D from the National Economic Council.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And great to see everybody again. Thanks to everyone who's here for this, to celebrate this exciting moment. As part of the NEC, we're delighted to partner with our friends at OSDP and at the NSC to launch this EO and to engage all of you in this exciting moment. This panel is about biomanufacturing, but of course, as all of us know in this world, the process is the product. So biomanufacturing has been part of this discussion right from the get-go. But I think that the importance of this panel is really about getting into what we've heard early on from White House leadership and from some of our other agency leaders, which is the how of building this industry, building bioeconomy capabilities in this country. And this panel is really about trying to drive home what does it mean to do this. And I'm really excited to have everyone here. I'll briefly introduce them, but again, I think you can find their bios on the website. But our goal here in the next hour or so is to talk about some of the topics that have already come up, but how do we actually take the R&D and move it into invent it here, not just invent it here, but make it here? What are the challenges that we have to actually doing that? And what are some of the policy ideas that people have that will help us advance this agenda? So let me just briefly introduce the panel. To my right, Dr. Christoph Schiller, the CEO of Geno, a biomaterials company. To my left, Dr. Tia Lyles-Williams, CEO of Lucas Pi Bio, which is a contract manufacturing company for biopharma. To my right, Dr. Doris Taylor, CEO of Organomet, which is a regeneration medical bio company.
To her right, Barbara McQuiston, Chief Technology Officer for Science and Technology at the Department of Defense. To my left, Stephen Krosky, CEO of Danimer Scientific, a bioplastics company. And then finally to my left, Dr. Doug Friedman, who is the Executive Director of Biomade, which you'll hear more about, which is a public-private initiative here in the country. So I'm going to start by having every one of the panelists give a few minutes introduction to themselves and to their company, so we have a sense of the breadth and depth of the biomanufacturing interests and capabilities here. And so I'm going to start, if I might, with Doug. I'm sorry, with Christophe.
Right. Well, first off, pleasure to be here. A wonderful moment in time for this industry and for this country. I think prioritizing biomanufacturing is a key strategic initiative. I'll give a little bit of background on myself. So I'm first generation born here in the U.S. The comments earlier on immigration, I can't support enough, coming from two parents who came to this country with a dream of providing an opportunity for their kids and what their kids could do. So I did my journey through Research Triangle Park at Duke University, went out to San Diego for my graduate studies, and had an idea to start a company about 20 plus years ago. And thanks to the National Science Foundation and an SBIR grant, I was able to actually do that. So Geno is an example over a long history of another one of these scenarios where government funding to support innovation and entrepreneurship really does make a difference. The company would not be here today if it wasn't for that. So we're very thankful of that. The company today stands at the forefront of delivering the technologies that will enable large-scale, large-volume manufacturing of widely used chemicals and ultimately materials that are derived from those, to be able to do that from renewable inputs instead of hydrocarbons. So we speak about topics like decarbonizing sectors of the chemical industry and so forth. We've actually commercialized 3 different products today. First product, and I'll give you an example of that, over about 4 million liters of installed capacity that's being put in place, over 100,000 tons of product that will be produced, and I'll give you a feel for where that goes in a moment and one of the examples around that. We talk a lot about being able to lead with technology and with manufacturing. Okay, so give you an example of what we've done. In first product that we commercialized is a molecule that most people haven't heard of, and so the molecule itself, to John's point earlier, getting closer to consumer products is what will make this sexy. But I will tell you, the molecule is called butanediol, BDO. Think spandex, think PBT plastics, think electronics, cars, these types of applications. A product that's made today 3 million tons in about 30 different petrochemical manufacturing plants throughout the world. Most of those plants recently that are being built to produce that are from coal in China. We've delivered a technology that can use renewable feedstocks with nearly a 90% reduction in global warming potential to be able to deliver that product. So 100,000 tons is what we're on the path to seeing produced with our technology, but in a 3 million ton per year market. So if we really want to be able to drive scale in terms of climate impact, that's the size of the opportunity that's out there. That's one product. We're also on the march to bring renewable feedstocks to make plant-based nylon with partners, brand owners like Lululemon. We're on the march now to provide alternatives to the supply chains that are dependent on palm oil with partners like Unilever to be able to drive those forward. So the possibilities for what we can do with biomanufacturing are substantial. The asks, I would say, are very similar to what you've heard in a number of cases, which in this case, I'm going to focus on the biomanufacturing level, which is really to provide support for the creation of large-scale commercial manufacturing infrastructure. There is a need for scale-up, absolutely, and you're going to probably hear that from others as well, but large-scale commercial manufacturing on the basis of the lowest cost feedstock in the world for renewable feedstocks, which is right here in the United States. So we're blessed with an innovation ecosystem that's amazing, but we need to be able to manufacture here in the United States. So opportunities to drive that, as well as opportunities to pull demand for these types of products. Most of the molecules that we'll make with biotechnology, many people won't know. But a lot of the products that they buy, and even a lot of products that the government buys, for example, they will know. I'll give you a simple example. If you just look around in the room, we have a number of flags. What are those flags made of? Probably made of nylon or a polyester that probably came from crude oil, that probably you won't even be able to know where that crude oil came from when you go and try to find out where it came from. So there's also an opportunity here for supply chain transparency, which is critical right now for a lot of brand owners. So I'll leave it at that, but thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Christoph. I hope our procurement folks are watching.
There you go.
Okay, Tia.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Got you. Good afternoon, everybody. Dr. Tia Lyles-Williams, founder and CEO of Lucas Pop Bio. First, I want to thank you for allowing me to be here today and share what we're doing at Lucas Pop Bio. I want to thank my supporters that have came today, EMSCO Scientific, Berkeley Lights, Heliplex, Jefferson Institute for Bioprocessing, University City Science Center, and special guest 54 Gene and Philadelphia OIC. Lucas Pop Bio is a contract development organization, manufacturing organization. So what that means is that we manufacture drugs on contract, particularly biologic drugs. So if you had the opportunity to partake in the COVID-19 vaccine, those are the type of drugs we make: viral vectors, gene vectors, monoclonal antibodies, cell therapies, you name it, anything large molecule or biologics we're able to make. Right now, we're able to service our customer needs for preclinical studies. We work in partnership with Thomas Jefferson University at the Jefferson Institute for Bioprocessing, as well as a cell line developer based in San Francisco, Celtheon. We're able to produce material and develop manufacturing processes for those biologic drugs, everything up until the point of sitting with FDA and getting permission to enter human clinical trials. Most recently, we just announced our CGMP facility that we're building out, 80,000 square foot bioprocessing facility in Southwest Philadelphia, PA. So this is an urban minority community of marginalized community members. It will be a full life science park. We're not only having Lucas Pop Bio, but the other anchor tenant would be Heliplex, which is an accelerator for life science startups to actually come in and manufacture their prototypes, so particularly seed-level companies. And then it will also double as a workforce development program that we'll get into later. And then the last piece of that campus is affordable housing with mixed retail. So first-time homeowners, people that need that discounted leverage for the salaries that they bring in, and then also a section off for people participating in workforce development that may need some additional help while participating in that program. Just to give you a bit of background, my education, I'm an alum of Howard University, where I study biology. I have a master's in business from Full Sail University, a master's in regulatory science from University of Southern California, and just received an honorary doctorate from Thomas Jefferson University. You know, I think I'm the face, or I am the face of what biotech is looking like now, what it's going to look like next as we move forward. But this is not anything new. It's just something that's been ignored. So as we talk about equity today, you know, I just want to remind or you know, offer a little bit of insight to say this really, you know, medicinal procedures and surgical operations really begin in Africa, particularly Egypt. They were the first to discover things like cancer, syphilis, chlamydia, surgical operations to mend bones. And then as we move forward, African Americans and people of African descent continue to participate in this industry. You have Dr. Percy Levon Julian, who was the first African American man to own a biomanufacturing facility, but also developed a mass production process for cortisone and progesterone. So he is the real grandfather of the biopharmaceutical industry. You have Dr. Charles Drew, who invented the blood banking system and how we do blood transfusions that we still do today. You have the Tuskegee Airmen experiment, unfortunately and fortunately in some retrospect. And then last but not least, you have Henrietta Lacks, whose cervical cells are literally the foundation of this trillion-dollar industry that we built here in Western medicine. And so I just want to impart on you to remember, you know, as we talk about manufacturing, to make sure we continue to talk about the equity piece, but also understand that the Industrial Revolution has always involved African Americans from down south, unfortunately with slavery with the cotton, all the way up to the Industrial Revolution back in the day when folks started migrating up to the Midwest to work in the steel mills and some of the other industrial companies at that time. And Lucas Pi Bio is at the forefront of that. Our C-suite is around 95% of people of African descent, 50% women. So we're really integrated and making sure that not only are we actively participating in this industry and doing the work to get the drugs that the patient needs, but also making it an equitable table for all members of America and around the globe to participate, not just as patients, but as employees, entrepreneurs, and all the way up to the C-suite. Thank you.
Thank you, Tia. Great. Doris.
I'm Doris Taylor, CEO of Organomet Bio. Organomet is bioengineering on-demand, personalized replacement hearts. Why? Because heart disease is the #1 killer globally. In this room, half the people in this room have heart disease. Look to the right, look to the left. If it's not the person to your right or left, it's you. Half the people in this room, and the number is increasing after COVID. 1/3 of the deaths in the US every year are from heart disease. And the only definitive treatment for heart disease at its end stage is a heart transplant. And yet, in the US, we only transplant 10 hearts a day when there are 3,200 people on the waiting list. And that means, and you take drugs every day for the rest of your life to prevent rejection. That means if you can't afford those drugs, if you are too old, if you are too sick, if you're not sick enough, you will never even make that list. My goal is to change that. We are building on-demand, personalized replacement hearts. We're biomanufacturing those in the US. We've proven we can do it, and now it's about scaling it up. So I think about biomanufacturing, and I want to emphasize the bio aspect of that, and the fact that we're talking about building therapies that are going to go into people's bodies and potentially promote a cure. For the first time, we can biomanufacture cures, but those are expensive. And that means we have to be able to scale up and build reagents and build tools and build hearts, build complex systems that are safe, reproducible, and that I'm willing to use in my mom or my daughter or my son, and therefore I'm willing to use in yours. As a result, we have a level we can't give a heart or cells or biologics to someone and take that back. We're putting those in to last for the lifetime of a patient, and so we have to build them to last for the lifetime of a patient. It's a new world for biomanufacturing. We've already seen examples of it. You heard EpiBone earlier today. And that means we have to have a new view of manufacturing. We're beginning to build that. Dean Kamen, Army, BioFab is building that in one instance, supported by the DoD. We have to change our paradigm. We have to be able to build complex systems, educate people how to work on those complex systems. Do you want somebody who doesn't quite know what they're doing building your heart? I don't think so. And we have to think about the fact that it's not a traditional business model. It's not a 5-year $100 million, I'll give you your drug, I'll give you your heart. You don't want the heart I build that way. What I've said is you don't want the Rube Goldberg heart. You want the one that's going to beat every minute of every hour of every day for the rest of your life. And therefore, you want me to spend what it's going to take to get this done. I can't do it alone. It's going to take partnerships. And I heard so many things in this room today that are the necessary partnerships. And then the final thing I want to say is I grew up in a single-parent family in Mississippi. I didn't go to school on the East Coast or the West Coast. I went to school in Mississippi. We have to recognize that new ideas and new capabilities don't just exist on the East and West Coast. They come from throughout this country, from people who look different and act different and are different, and that's what makes us better.
Thank you so much, Doris. Steve.
Thank you, Liz. Good morning. I'd like to thank the White House for allowing me to represent Danimer Scientific and the bioplastics industry on today's panel. We've all seen the images of trash piling up on the beaches all over the world. This is a pet peeve of mine and why I'm here today. Our company is working to fix this issue. Danimer Scientific is a leading producer of PHA, a renewable and biodegradable plastic that can be used in a wide variety of applications. A few examples include drinking straws, snack food and candy packaging, and coatings for paper products that require moisture and grease barrier. We've got partnerships with many global companies, including PepsiCo, Mars, and Bacardi, and we're creating innovative solutions that brands can use to reduce their impact on the environment. Starbucks is using our home compostable, or straws made from our home compostable resin today in all their U.S. stores. So I was real happy to see Starbucks out there today. Thank you. Our material has been certified to quickly break down in marine, freshwater, and soil environments, as well as in home and industrial composts. While we certainly don't encourage littering, our material breaks down completely without leaving behind microplastics. And I will briefly explain, in hopefully in layman's terms, how this product's actually made. It's nature's way of recycling carbon. It exists. It's ubiquitous in nature. If a leaf falls from a tree, there's microorganisms in the soil that will consume the carbon in that leaf. They convert the carbon in the leaf into another form of carbon for their own metabolic uses. That carbon is PHA. So we replicate that process in fermentation. So I call it bug fat. We fatten these bugs up, and then we break that cell wall open. And by the way, the scientists will all discourage me after this because it's not fat, it's carbon. But we break that cell wall open, and we extract the PHA from inside the cell wall, and that's the beauty of it. That is the plastic resin. And so if it escapes or leaks into nature, it's a preferred food source for bacteria and will go away, even in a marine environment. Our company was founded in 2004 in Bainbridge, Georgia, a very rural community in the southwestern part of the state. And I'd like to give I guess Tia gave the first shout out actually, but I'll give a shout out to all the farmers and local business people in Decatur County who had a vision of a better future and funded this company for the first 15 years of our life. It's really cool to be here today, and hopefully you folks watching at home, you should be proud of where we're at now. Since 2004, we've invested hundreds of millions of dollars into PHA and created hundreds of STEM-related jobs. In 2018, we purchased and began retrofitting a shuttered fermentation facility in another rural community, Winchester, Kentucky. In 2020, we began shipping degradable plastics from this facility. We recently broke ground on a new manufacturing facility in Bainbridge that will increase our capacity to approximately 190 million pounds of plastic resin and create an additional hundreds of well-paying jobs. In 2021, last year, we also acquired a company in Rochester, New York called Novomer, a startup that has developed a complementary PHA that will help us increase capacity and target new markets. We're proving that bio-based manufacturing can not only create sustainable products to help the public and private sector achieve our ESG goals, but also help improve livelihoods in rural communities. You can really see the positive impact our company's success has had when you go to the little square in Bainbridge and see the bustle and hustle of activity there and all the new businesses that's starting up, things that weren't there 10 years ago. I find it very exciting. The National Biotechnology and Biomanufacturing Initiative just announced by the White House provides the vision and essential framework for growing the U.S. bioeconomy, and I applaud President Biden for his leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Doug.
Thanks, Liz. I am so pleased to be here today with you all. This day has been a long time coming, and I want to first thank President Biden, his leadership, as well as the leadership of countless individuals, many of whom are in this room, many of whom are not in this room, many of whom have been working on this for a decade or more to really get to this point, which I truly believe is a pivot point. We are at an inflection point in biotechnology and biomanufacturing. And I am also pleased to be going at the end of the day after we have heard from so many companies, so many federal agencies really talking about the whole of government, whole of country approach to attacking this problem and really making a substantive difference. I am also pleased to represent Biomade, a Manufacturing USA institute focused on bioindustrial products. We were catalyzed by the Department of Defense almost exactly 2 years ago. Our 2-year birthday is in 6 days, which is really hard to believe. And we are now working with companies, universities, nonprofits, community colleges in almost 30 states. So to the point about how biotechnology and biomanufacturing is really a whole of country approach, if we do not have all 50 states, plus the District of Columbia, plus Puerto Rico, plus other parts of the country, all in it together, we will not reach the full potential, the $30 trillion potential that was discussed earlier today. I'm also pleased to announce that today we have our next crop of projects kicking off. So we have almost $20 million of effort across 9 projects, that include some of the companies and universities that have been represented over the course of the day. It's noteworthy to me that of the panelists that have participated in this summit, more than half of them are involved in Biomade today. And my message to the half that aren't, and to all of those that are out there, we really hope that Biomade can serve as a bridge to help bring the governmental sector and the private sector closer together, translate for you, so that the economic promise that we've been talking about today comes out. I want to thank Representative Ross for bringing up community colleges very early in the day. Biomade focuses on technology and innovation, but we have a very strong workforce development push led by Dr. Tom Tuban, our head of workforce development, who really is a master of working with the community college infrastructure in this country. If you look at how biology and biotechnology has evolved over time, it has largely involved 4-year universities. And that's not necessarily surprising as you watch a technology go from early stage to getting closer and closer to commercialization. But as we really start to think about what does manufacturing look like, if we are at the scale and having the impact that we're talking about, the community college infrastructure in this country is a national treasure. And we should be leaning heavily into that and leveraging it and building on it to represent the diversity that we can. The final 2 comments I want to make are also about standards, norms, safety, security, and transparency. We have a thrust that we call 4S, safety, security, sustainability, and social responsibility, that permeates everything that we do. And I've been exceptionally happy that the companies that we work with are really the driving force behind this. Companies that have started in this industry really take very seriously all 4 of those pillars and want to work together, want to work with the academic sector, with government, with civil society writ large, to make sure that that maintains and sustains as the industry grows. And the last thing I'll comment on as we get into the discussion here today is that biotechnology over the last 20-ish, 30-ish years has been sustained by billions of dollars of U.S. federal investment. Every single federal agency has played a role in one way or another over that time. And now we are at a point where we have to take all of that underlying innovation that we have and that we have developed and that we have supported and translate that into commercial enterprises, companies that have a wide diversity of business models, some that are focused on products, some that are focused on platforms, some that are focused on underlying technologies, some that are focused on sensor systems. I could go for a long time, but I will stop here. Bring them all together and build to commercial, profitable enterprises that ultimately deliver the solutions that are contemplated in the initiative that we're discussing today. And that's what I hope Biomade, with the federal government, with the rest of the ecosystem that's been developed and will continue to develop, can do simply as fast as possible.
Thank you, Doug. And last but not least, Barbara.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. My career has been at DARPA and now over at the DoD under the Secretary of Defense and the Science and Technology portion. And, when we at DARPA, we're dreaming about, what could be possible and looking at where the technology could go, how it would impact our mission's performance, the future global challenges that we have here. And many of you here are a result of a lot of the investment that was made in the early stages of being able to dream and make that happen, where we have Amyris, Biomason, Ginkgo. I mean, I could go on and on with a lot of people in this room right now who probably could point back to some of their roots of where they were. SBIR program, that's awesome, and DARPA, but these investments are extremely important. One of the good things about DARPA is they can prove where you can push the frontier, but there's a whole other portion of investment that has to go forward in order to have manufacturable support of the product in the industrial base. And the Defense Department cares a lot about that. We care a lot about that because we buy materials, we buy lubricants, we buy sustainable fuels, we buy resins, precursors. There's so many things, rubber, that we're dependent on for our supply chain, that we really pay attention to how the industrial base is working and what can we do to move forward so that we have national and economic security that we can have for this country and our domestic manufacturing. As Secretary Hicks mentioned, we have $1.5 billion in biomanufacturing going forward, and a lot of that is in our manufacturing innovation institutes, both of which are represented here. You just heard from Biomade, and there's BioFab and Army out there, which is Dean is in the back there, so Dean Kamen. And these sort of investments are where we can have public-private money coming together, where the Defense Department can put their manufacturing challenges forward so that we can create an ecosystem around key areas of biomanufacturing to de-risk the manufacturing and help accelerate both the scaling up and the scaling out of this technology, because it really is something that's going to change the whole paradigm of how we look at many of the things we do across the board. So it's hard to even list all the things that this touches for the Defense Department and for all of us in this nation. But having the ability to produce that ecosystem, to have the companies and the universities and the large companies that have needs across the board come together and work on doing this together, on getting these hard challenges and addressing them, is key. When I think a lot about
one of the things is the key basis of why we're here right now is because this has become taking biology and putting it into a predictable engineering practice. And that's the basis of what we're looking at, but what we can manufacture is also key. When we look at being able to synthetically make rare earth metals and other things, that's a catalyst for so many of the other industries that we need to move forward in clean energy, electrification, other things. So this is a huge portion of security for this nation. And so how we step out on that is going to be key, but we have to catalyze it. We have to bring together the public-private partnerships. We also have to care about where we're getting the workforce and where the future is, and in a lot of the STEM education that goes on. We have a lot of efforts in this. We work, an example is the FIRST robotics program that Dean Kamen has, where you're looking at being able to touch tens of thousands of students and giving them challenge in competing in robotics, 3D printing of biomaterials, learning basics of how tissue and organ manufacture can move forward. What you really want to do is be able to have the STEM education in place so that the students from the next generation can see themselves in this industry and moving forward. We can have the next Doris Taylor out there who has a dream of where they want to be and can see themselves in that dream. And this is going to be incredibly important. We also need to tap into what we have, which we're looking at relative to certification and training programs. Where are we going to get the workforce from? And how are we going to transform the biomanufacturing technicians that we need today, working with community colleges, universities, developing all of the materials that are needed to move that forward. So all these things come together as well as the individual investments that we have with specific universities, Arizona State, Boston University, UC Santa Barbara, that are developing K through 12 student teacher training courses with the community colleges and university activities all around biotechnology. We have a center of excellence in biotechnology at North Carolina Agriculture and Technical State University. All of this is helping move together education, workforce development, and the industrial base that we have. And this is really exciting because in the end, you know, everybody will be looking at us saying, well, of course everything's biologically manufactured. I'm from DARPA. I understand this. You know, when we started off with automated car driving, you know, it was like, well, you know, people thought we were nuts. Now everybody's like, well, why doesn't my car park itself? So someday you'll be in this room like I am now, and everybody else will be saying, of course everything's biologically made. Of course we're using CO2 and all of the things that are a problem right now into an opportunity. We have that chance to transform the nation and to transform how globally we approach these challenges. And I'm very excited to be here, and I'm honored to be here in a room of such great people that are actually helping us move this forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. We're going to shift now to one of the topics that's been, I think, present throughout the day, and that is the issue of capital and scale-up. This has been a challenge in not only in this industry, but across the board for the U.S. We have an incredible startup ecosystem. Our scale-up ecosystem leaves a little bit to be desired. We have companies here on this panel that range from 2 years old to 20 years old, and I think they all have really worthwhile experiences to share with us about their capital challenges and opportunities and the scale-up challenge that they see. So I'd like to start with that conversation. I will ask the panelists to be a little bit tighter with our responses. I love hearing from this panel, and we have a lot to say, but let's try and keep things to a couple minutes. So I'm going to start with Christoph. Christoph, you've talked about being, starting 22 years ago and the challenges of commercial production in particular, which we know other countries are much more aggressive about supporting companies and others in their commercial production. Can you talk a little bit about your pathway?
Yeah, let me share I think the story of BDO in a little bit more detail to give you a feel for that. We today face this scale-up challenge in terms of the U.S. and where the opportunity sits, and in that I think we have 5 scale-up programs that are underway today. They're all being scaled up in Europe. We have originally, when the first commercial facility for BDO was built, it's in northern Italy, 30,000 tons. It was about a $150 million capital investment to go build that facility. And fortunately, though, there's a great example today on BDO where that's being scaled up in the U.S. So there's a 65,000 ton per year facility that's being built by an entity called CORE, Q-O-R-E. It's a joint venture between Cargill and Helm, which is the largest bulk distributor of chemicals globally. And it's in Eddyville, Iowa. And why is it in Eddyville, Iowa? Because I'll highlight a couple things that are really important when we think about commercial scale and at the volumes that we're talking about, which, to be honest, are still small relative to what you're competing against, okay? So you really need to think about low-cost feedstock. You need to think about infrastructure. And you need to think about renewable energy. And why renewable energy? Because the existing petrochemical industry, what they will do is they will switch to renewable energy and claim a lot of positives from that. And that's a good shift. We need to see that. But that also means that if making bio-based products, if we're not using renewable energy, we're exposed, right? So you're exposed to that. So Iowa's great because wind power, huge investments were made into wind power. Why Eddyville, Iowa? Cargill has a very large biorefinery that sits in Eddyville, Iowa, that provides low-cost feedstocks, right? And ultimately, this plant will provide value-added outlets for farmers in Iowa. It'll create probably 50 skilled jobs to operate that type of a facility. So it's a great example, but it gives you a feel of the scope of that, and that's a $300 million capital project, right? And again, that's just a start in a very large market opportunity. So that scale-up challenge, we're seeing a good example here in the U.S., but over in Europe, we see a lot more demand pull for products, a lot more recognition around climate and carbon and how to account for that and how to address those issues. So it's this opportunity, right? Lowest cost feedstock in the world here in the U.S., the innovations here in the U.S., if we can get the ecosystem right, which we're making good progress, I think, here with what's happening today, there's just a tremendous opportunity. But there has been a history where we've had to go elsewhere for a lot of this. We lived that firsthand.
Thank you, Christoph. And I think to your point about demand pull, hopefully we see a lot of activity by this administration, particularly around the Inflation Reduction Act and climate-related things that are going to help with that. When you talk about the ecosystem, I want to turn to Doug, whose institute, one of the 16 Manufacturing USA Institutes. If people are not familiar with these were set up for a decade or sooner and are focused on trying to move from lab to market, because that we have understood that that's a weakness here. And so 16 across different types of technologies, including, I want to mention Kelvin Lee, Executive Director of Nimble, which focuses on biopharmaceutical innovation as well. Can you talk a little bit about your being a bridge on this scale-up point and just briefly explain kind of how that works?
Sure. I'll tell a very brief story that I think clearly articulates what is going on here. When Biomade was negative 18 months old, so about a year and a half before Biomade existed, the Engineering Biology Research Consortium pulled together as many companies as would show up in a room to talk about what does the industry need to be successful as an industry, right? To do exactly what we're talking about. And it was a listening session. The number one thing that came up, literally every company who showed up in one way or another brought up scale-up infrastructure. Now, it turned out at the time that was like the only thing off the table. So we're really grateful to the DoD for stepping up in a serious way right now to throw that on the table. But that's what we heard. And we heard story after story about how companies were getting to the point where they've developed a set of underlying technology. They have products that they sort of know how to make. We can get into that if we have time. But they need to scale them to the point where they're making a relevant amount of material so customers can test them. And virtually all of them were going outside of the US. And so this idea of how do we think about scale-up infrastructure in a networked and cohesive manner that's able to capture the most relevant parts of the chemicals market. And so the other aspect of this to bring up that I really appreciate Christoph commenting on the scale that Gino is talking about is still small compared to the industrial chemicals market. I urge you to just think of the petroleum industry, the whole thing. That's what we're talking about, right? That is what we are talking about. That is the scale of carbon that we are talking about. And in order for that to have a meaningful impact, in order for all of these technologies to have a meaningful impact, as quickly as possible, companies need to spin out a kilogram, a few kilograms, a ton of product so that customers, like the DoD, for example, can go test that, right? How does that work in a system that is relevant, right? How do we get that in the hands of customers quickly? How do companies fail in product development quickly, right? Would you have to wait a long time and go overseas? That's a lot of money, right? You're burning money. A product fails, now all of a sudden you don't have any money, your company goes out of business, right? That is a pretty bad place for the industry to be if companies are going out of business when their first or second product fails. You've got to be able to iterate quickly. And so the idea of how scale up manufacturing and what role CDMOs in the bioindustrial space work is a real opportunity now. And I think this initiative provides a really strong foundation that now many federal agencies, and I really hope Congress, take some ownership over and say, if we're going to do it, we have to do it right now because we are already behind, but we have an opportunity to catch up, and we have an opportunity to catch up in a way that the companies build their manufacturing capacity here.
I'll add one more comment to that, and that is that we care a lot about what the demand signal is too, because for the DoD, if we need to have it in the industrial base. If you can't make it, we can't buy it, and it doesn't help us. So we're launching the Tri-Service Biotechnology for Resilient Supply Chain with $270 million over the next 5 years in order to be able to bring that bio-based materials, fuels, fire-resistant materials, polymers, resins, we can go on and on as to what we have and what our need is, but to start to bring that into the supply chain, because that demand signal will be huge as far as being able to qualify it, get it into the system, and have it there for the DoD and move it forward. So I think that's one of the things that we're doing right now that will be helpful.
Okay, say one thing, Doris, yeah.
We have to do this for biology too. We have to think about the bioproducts.
Yeah, great. Okay, speaking of, thank you for that, the bioproducts and also CMOs, et cetera. Tia, you want to talk a little bit about your finance pathway?
Sure. So just in response to that, for a CDMO, it takes a great deal of investment. So for instance, we're a startup. Our startup costs $130 million. Now, while this is significantly cheaper, right, than some of the larger CDMOs that are building facilities for $800, $900 million, it still is a struggle, right? Traditionally, CDMOs in the U.S. have started out as biotech companies with products that may have failed or they may have not wanted to move forward for whatever reason, so they transform into CDMOs in order to provide a return on investment for their investors. Unlike us, with Lucas Pipe Bio, we're starting out as a CDMO on purpose, right? Our primary goal is really to service the needs of life science startups that need to build these prototypes so they can get in front of FDA and push it through human clinical trials and then get it out in front of whatever regulatory agency for the commercial market. So it's two things with CDMOs that comes with growth and scale. One is obviously the startup investment to build this monstrous facility that we need to build to manufacture all these different type of molecules. But the other part is the investment into the startups and the small and mid-sized biotech companies so they can afford the services that we offer. And then the last but not least, even with government contracts, the other part to make this thing work as far as the bioeconomy is requiring that some of these larger players that get these contracts so often, whether it come from BARDA, DARPA, DOD. We've actually responded to a request for information concerning how we would be able to participate and be beneficial to Biden's order, bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. and, more importantly, helping to manufacture some of these vaccines for COVID-19 and what else is coming our way, right? Is that COVID-19 is definitely not the first, and it's obviously not the last, as we have the onset of other things coming along, including the monkeypox. So with the bit of the government contracts, what we offered in our proposal to the response to BARDA was that a requirement needs to be there, similar to how you have in the construction business, right? You have construction companies, architect companies that subcontract to minority companies. It needs to be done the same way in the CDMO industry in order to build up this bioeconomy that's going to be equitable in all types of communities and not just the same suburbs that has always been traditionally. And then last but not least, making sure that DEI and that equity is built in not just in subcontracting, but also the way the larger company looks. So we can't have the same faces at the C-suite. That needs to be diverse. When you build in this equitable piece and this diversity piece, it really does circulate that dollar, right? That's how it used to be in the past. That's how you have, cities that used to thrive, like Gary, Indiana, where I'm from, Chester, PA, all those Rust Belt towns. They thrive because they had a diverse community with a diverse economy where a dollar constantly circulated before those particular industries were taken away. So again, to summarize, there's two things for the growth and scale and what we're asking for the U.S. to do. Inject that money into the life science startups, including myself as a CDMO, and then also the other part is there need to be some type of financial support to build these facilities in order to improve the workforce and improve the local bioeconomy within these communities.
Thank you. Doris, did you want to have one word on financing?
Financing companies in this space is not a five-year traditional business model. And we're going to have to think about it differently. We're going to have to acknowledge that building biology is not the same as building small molecules. I love molecules. I love all of the things we're talking about when molecules are not cells, they're not tissues, they're not organs. And the level of complexity and the pathway forward is different, expensive, and we have to start government. I believe government has an opportunity here to actually enable companies to move beyond simply the idea and get us to some successful products.
Thank you. Great. Let's shift now to the other, I think, another key topic that we've heard all day about, which is workforce and developing the workforce for this industry going forward. Certainly, we have a labor shortage, as we know, across the country now, and we certainly had a labor shortage, particularly in manufacturing, before the pandemic, and trajectory-wise, that will continue, and given demographics, et cetera. So how are we going to bring in the next generation of workers? And I think the opportunity here, as we've heard, ranges from our high school and community college kids all the way up through PhDs. So let me first turn to Steve and what you've been doing, as you said earlier, in Georgia and in Kentucky to recruit and to train workers in your business.
Sure, Liz. First, I have to say I looked to my left and to my right, and I realized Doug was obviously a member of Biomade, so that means I'm not. But we'll fix that. Okay. Hopefully, my heart's okay. Okay. So we have fantastic employees, but we operate in a very rural community, in very rural communities. So you can imagine if you need to hire somebody with a master's in chemical engineering or a PhD in microbiology, that's tough to find. One of the things that we've done to help mitigate this is having a fairly robust internship program where we identify kids at the high school level and start bringing them in the summers, and then we help sponsor them when they go to college. And we have had several kids like this who started with us in high school and went on to get PhDs and have now come back and worked for us. And I think this is something that the government could help us with by subsidizing internship programs, developing scholarships for STEM STEM scholarships, but tied to the student coming back into that rural community to get their first job. And so I think those are some, fairly simple things that could be done to help.
That's just great stories, Steve. Really inspiring. Tia, did you want to say about from rural to urban?
Sure. I think, we talk about K through 12 and college and the PhDs and things alike, but the target market that's really missing is the workforce, the ages between 25 and 45. So for Lucas Pi Bio, we're partnering with several organizations, some that I mentioned here today, EMSCO, Jefferson Institute for Bioprocessing, UC Science Center, and building a workforce development program that targets the market from not only entry level, but all the way up to C-suite and pops out to entrepreneurship. The entry level program is a 36-week program, paid. They come in, they learn to become a bioprocess operator and a quality control technician. They even have an opportunity to gain 6 college credits, whether it's graduate or undergraduate, particularly from Jefferson Institute for Bioprocessing. And the reason why we're targeting that market is because they're already experienced, right? They've already been in the workforce. They know the nuances of communications and the expectations of what to do when it's on the job. And more importantly, after that, it provides the next generation from K through 12 to see somebody that looks like them actually doing the work, being able to come in, whether they have a degree or not. Ours is a minimum of a GED or a high school diploma. However, we do welcome people that may have degrees. But the point is they need to actually see people actually doing the work to get them interested to, what was the word today, to make it sexy, right? To get them interested in doing this type of work. And more importantly, again, building that bio economy. As far as the members of marginalized communities that may already been working in biotech, I'm the face of that. I've been working in the industry for 22 years. I've worked at Baxter, I've worked at GSK, I've worked at Amgen, Lonza, you name it, I've been there. All these companies that I've named, I've never once got hired directly. I've always had to go through a hiring agency or a temp agency. So that means I often went 6 months to a year with no benefits, no PTO, every time I had to move and start over. With our program, we're requiring that these graduates from our program to be hired permanently as employees. There is a 120-day probationary period for the company to say, okay. Once the company says, okay, they pay 12% of that salary back into this program so that it remains free. We'll be piloting this program next summer in the city of Philadelphia. We already have employers attached to it. Lucas Pi Bio, obviously, we need around 250 people when doors open in 2024, so we'll be doing ongoing hiring. We also have Delaware State University as a participating employer with their molecular lab that they have down in Wilmington. And then one of the biggest employers that we have committed to date is Spark Therapeutics. And I think the reason why we're able to attract somebody like Spark Therapeutics is because it's not just the academia portion of the curriculum with Jefferson Institute for Bioprocessing or UC Science Center's BULB program, but it also includes the industry trade organizations such as ISPE, ASQ, and RAP. So now it's not just Tia and her company, her partners saying that these individuals are qualified to do the work. Now we have third-party certificates of completion and certifications to advocate for them to say, hey, these folks are ready to work. But that is really the target market we need to concentrate on if we're going to level the playing field and close this wealth gap in marginalized communities.
Thank you, Tia. That is really inspiring and speaks to the whole ecosystem and how we build partnerships. And I just want to do a shout out for 4 of the winners. Senator Warner talked about the Build Back Better Regional Challenge, and just a few weeks ago, EDA announced the winners. This is a really impressive investment in a type of area where communities have competitive advantage and can build out community work. And we have a number of the winners here from Virginia, Oklahoma, North Carolina, and New Hampshire. And this is exactly the kinds of programs and ways in which we are trying to build out not just the technology, not just the R&D and the scale-up, but the workforce and the impacts on place. So very excited about that. We are, needless to say, running out of time. So I'm going to wrap us up at this point with an exercise that I think should be interesting and engaging, which is to ask each of our panelists to, in a minute or so, let me just say in a minute or so, to talk about what policy or policies you'd like to put forward and have have this broader community consider and be part of our initiative here around building the bioeconomy. So I think I will start with Christoph.
All right, well, I already mentioned a couple. So I
Yes.
think infrastructure in terms of funding at the commercial scale, there's vehicles that exist, I think, to help fuel that. They need to be charged up, I think, with more dollars and widened in terms of the scope of product opportunities they support. These are topics like, or programs like loan guarantees, for example, those types of issues. On the demand side, I think strengthening the BioPreferred program and thinking through on the BioPreferred program the kinds of products may not be necessarily biomanufactured, but it may be downstream where you start to see the biomanufactured ingredients coming into products. How do we capture that in a BioPreferred to pull demand? And then the third is a little bit more aspirational, but if I think about the climate crisis that we have and how to address that, figuring out ways in which we put a value around carbon and the carbon savings that biotechnology and biomanufacturing can deliver is crucial. How to think about putting a value on that, and how to think even about concepts like carbon border adjustment mechanisms to create a level playing field internationally. Those would be my top items.
Great, thinking big. I like it. Doris?
I have really three things. I have three things. The first is, I think from a policy perspective, anyone who gets federally funded research that is commercialized and results in a product, if those individuals were asked to pay a small royalty back to a fund that actually would be used to support new co's and new ideas, we could feed forward. It could be a give back. I think number two, if the government created online tools to educate both process and engineering people about biology people about process, we could shorten the path to products and decrease risk. I think if we also created a business mindset so that science is created in a clinically relevant or business relevant way in academic settings, and that were rewarded at the level of government funding, that would change everything. And then finally, I think creating a common vocabulary and a dictionary of biomanufacturing, bioscience, biotechnology, and making that available so that we're all speaking the same language.
I like that. That would be a step forward. Tia? Oh, sorry.
That's all good. That's all good with Sharon. First thing is, as we talked about funding before, for scaling and growing companies, but also, again, minority-owned companies that obviously don't have the same access to funding. I think there needs to be funding to support those companies and making sure that larger or majority Caucasian companies have an equity piece when it comes to supply chain. So making sure minority-owned lab supply companies, CDMOs, CROs, take your pick, have a seat at the table and have a real opportunity and a shot to go after some of these government contracts. The next thing is advocacy and voting for a bill that we've been working on with Representative Butterfield out in North Carolina. It's called the American Biotechnology Workforce Development Centers of Excellence. It's a bill that's proposing a minimum of $1 million to support not only community colleges and universities, but also apprenticeship programs like the one we're building with my partners to really build a pipeline to the workforce and make it more equitable. And then last but not least, similar to I think what Doris or either Barbara just mentioned, I forget who just said it, but some type of funding for life science startups, particularly minority-owned, that need the funding at the seed level to really build their prototype to get in front and gather the data they need to get in front of the regulatory agency to move towards that next step of human clinical trials or human factors for the medical device people. All of those things will help build the bioeconomy and, more importantly, make it more equitable for everybody to have an opportunity.
Thank you. Steve?
Thank you, Liz. So on the last panel, John answered this question by saying he wanted $1 billion, so we'll take $2 billion, and that'll settle for $500 million. Okay, so most of the plastics industry is focused on improving recycling rates, but recycling is not a complete solution, and you can imagine who's behind that narrative. There are many applications where plastic cannot be recycled, and less than 10% of plastics are being recycled today. So it's minuscule. I believe that home and industrial compostable plastics are a key part of solving the plastic waste crisis, as these products can be disposed of with food waste, which is something that we're going to have for a long time, is food waste. A growing number of states and localities are passing bans that don't consider this industry-led innovation. Federal policy could help create an environment where biodegradable plastics can be widely adopted. Secondly, there's a current tax policy that gives $1 per gallon to blenders of biodiesel. So if you're using vegetable oil in your diesel fuel, you're getting $1 a gallon tax credit, which disadvantages the rest of us that are buying vegetable oil and trying to, do things that are environmentally friendly. So there's a current legislation being considered that's bipartisan, HR 2532, the Renewable Chemicals Act, which would go a long ways towards solving that discrepancy. Finally, and I hope Barbara's listening down there, when we talk about scale, we're not just talking about building factories, but we're talking about selling the factories out and selling that product, because obviously the more product you sell, the more overheads you can carry, per pound. You can lower your cost, which will accelerate adoption. And the U.S. government is one of the biggest purchasers of plastics, and the U.S. military and one of the biggest users of plastics in the world. And so that's something, I would like to just point out that, the U.S. government could encourage use of these products internally. And this is not hypothetical. These products are available today, and you can buy them right now.
Thank you. I think message heard. Doug.
All right, Liz challenged me to 1 minute, so I set a timer. I'm going to bring up three things. So first, tying procurement into the mix. So one of the problems that we have is you scale a product, but then you're uncertain about a customer. Lots of government customers are available, lots of government R&D goes into it, but then if the government doesn't buy the product at the end, there's a problem. Gotta tie procurement into it in a robust and meaningful way. Climate resiliency. Biology and biomanufacturing has an opportunity to be truly distributed. Right now, the chemicals industry in the industrials market is highly localized in a bunch of places that are just getting hammered by climate change. We can use that to expand to hit all 50 states so that when climate change is hammering one part of the country, another part of the country is online. We still have to solve the climate change problem. Last, infrastructure. Tying in infrastructure to really meet company commercial needs so that the industrial base is there to serve. I was 8 seconds over, I'm sorry.
Good job.
All right, Barbara, less than 1 minute.
All right, I have less than 1 minute. Need to be pioneered, and government needs to take a strong hand in that to make those tools available and to work that. Public-private investment and working cooperatively with the industry, but also looking at how we can accelerate regulatory processes under the new paradigm of how we're doing things. And finally, to expand the opportunities and the mentorships, especially in the underrepresented populations, because we need to have everybody on board this industrial revolution. So thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all. This has been a fantastic panel and clearly an exciting agenda ahead. I'm going to hand back to Michelle now.
Thank you all. As Liz mentioned, what a great panel. Thank you all to all of our speakers. Let's do another round of applause for the panel. And finally, to close, I'm going to turn to Dr. Megan Frisk, Director for Biotechnology Risk and Biological Weapons Nonproliferation, to end our day today. Megan, over to you.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Michelle. It's great to be here today. As Michelle said, I'm Megan Frisk. I am a director on the National Security Council in our Directorate for Global Health Security and Biodefense. I'm honored to have this opportunity to close out this auspicious summit. what an exciting week it has been for bio. As we look to what the United States can do over the next decade in biotechnology and biomanufacturing for health, for food security, for agricultural innovation, for climate-smart solutions, for energy, and so on, one would only need to listen to our brilliant speakers today for inspiration. From undersea biocement to lab-grown bone to protein from air, U.S. ingenuity and passion was on display today. As National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said, awesome. Rather than try to faithfully and fully summarize the panels, which would probably not do the day justice, I just wanted to lift up some themes that carried through among all of the terrific technologies that were discussed. Biotech is indeed foundational to our economic and national security. We need to lead, to compete, to deliver innovative solutions to global challenges, and at the same time remain mindful of the risks and have transparent and open discussions on biosafety and biosecurity. We need to train a workforce that harnesses the diversity of our country and gives opportunities to all, and is built on our values. As we heard, the who and the how we train are paramount. We need to involve and engage our societies, both foreign and domestic, so we are considering people and ethics throughout the life cycle of tech development and deployment. Do it with care, we heard. We will thrive on this symbiosis of government, academia, and industry, this ecosystem, as it has been called, to realize this shared purpose and vision for our bioeconomy. And lastly, we must do this side by side, shoulder to shoulder, with our international partners, with our shared norms, principles, and values in mind. So as the last word here, I'd like to also take this moment to give some thanks and recognize you. First, a huge thank you to all of our participants who came from all over the country to celebrate this National Biotechnology and Biomanufacturing Initiative, something that has been brewing for more than 10 years and has now been launched by the Biden administration. We are grateful not only for your time here, but for the immensely valuable contributions you have made and will continue to make to America's bioeconomy. In some ways, as many have said, the real work is just beginning if we are going to realize all that biotechnology and biomanufacturing can offer our economic growth, prosperity, and competitiveness globally. And we are proud to have you as partners in this whole-of-nation effort. Second, a thank you from the White House, especially NSC, NEC, OSTP, to our colleagues across the federal government. We know that many of you could not be here today in person, but it has been an incredible team effort for several years. And finally, to the hero that really made this summit happen, the one name I will shout out is Nate Parsons from OSTP. Thank you. So we have a lot of hard work ahead of us to foster transformation in our biotechnology and biomanufacturing enterprise in a way that will deliver for all Americans, whether new products and services, jobs, or lower prices. But today, in this moment, it has been wonderful to celebrate the accomplishments and the vision from government, academia, industry, scientific leaders, and we can't wait to see what we can do next together. Thank you.